Hello again, friends! And you are our friends, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here. Wherever it is that you are, this is dropping on the 1st of December. We are officially in the holiday season. I am the great Brian Last, your host, and of course the man joining me who will be answering your questions on this spectacular wrestling podcast today, the leader of the cult of Cornette, the exalted one of Louisville, Kentucky, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Was that a sideways little elbow in my ribs there, Brian Last?
It wasn't, and I don't even know which part of it you're referring to.
This is dropping on December 1st. I've heard in your mind you mentally telepathied the words "one day late."
I did not say it.
You didn't say it, but you thought it. You were thinning it. And I expected you to come out and just say, and here's the man whose fault it is that we're a day late, Mr. Jim Cornette. But no, you restrained yourself, but you sent it to me by mental telepathy.
That's not true. I didn't say it, and if we're going to start persecuting people on the show for their thoughts, the show will be over very quickly.
I just saw that South Park where they wired Cartman's brain up to a new form of Twitter called Shitter, where if you just thought anything, it would just be broadcast out to the world. And, that probably is the next step here. I think Twitter already is. People think shit and it just gets broadcast out to the world. But no, it is my fault we're a day late because, as you know, there's been exterior work being done around the castle for the last several weeks. And we've tried to schedule around it, but sometimes we've been fighting the end of good weather, trying to get things done and wrapped up before the end of the good weather. And the Monroe brothers, Alf and Ralph, my contractors, they called because the day we were supposed to record was 50-something degrees and cloudy, and that just happened to be the Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend, whereas today it is 30-something degrees and snow flurrying. So therefore, they wanted to come and get those things did, and they did them things. But it would have made a lot of noise. And but actually I saved you, Brian Last. If beknownst the truth of it, if people want to just come out and just know the truth of this whole thing, I saved you by rescheduling this recording session for the afternoon after we were going to record. You know how?
No.
Because you, Brian Last, have been increasingly unstable here on the program the last couple of weeks because you've been increasingly unstable. You have an anger management issue.
Oh, come on.
You are very abusive with your language. You're not like the normal tone that we keep here on the program, which is love in the air and sunshine, lollipops and rainbows and waterfalls. You have been flipping out. You needed some serious, I don't know, whether counseling or Xanax or something the past couple weeks because it's gotten to where we were taping in the evening to get around some of this work issue. And by then you were a cranky bastard. When the sun goes down, you get angry. And it's been showing. People have noticed this. So I said, let's just do it tomorrow during the day when it's going to be bad weather outside and we'll have peace and quiet. I'm trying to save your reputation. Brian, people are starting to think that you're a little unhinged.
Listen, it has nothing to do with the time of day. It has everything to do with the modern wrestling we watch each week. I could ask you all these questions and be in a cheerful mood throughout the episode, but it's after watching NXT and AEW 4 hours or 3.5 hours as I'm zipping through the shows.
Sometimes 3, maybe we try to go for 2:45 these days,
But it's a lot of wrestling to watch and then turn around and have to talk about it. And there's things I want to talk about.
I think one of the quotes from one of the shows is just stupid, and it just sucks, and it's stupid.
It is. It's bad TV. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of people love AEW blindly. And I understand why they're happy that AEW exists. And if you enjoy that style of wrestling, I can understand why you are really happy that AEW exists. But if you're someone who likes logical television or wrestling booking that makes sense or things that are followed up upon from week to week to week, despite who the people are in the angles, who the wrestlers are working there, it's awful booking. It's a horribly booked show. And now,
let's spread a little love around because you singled out AEW, but NXT is like watching.
Oh yeah,
it's like watching somebody pull your pubic hairs out. It hurts, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Like I said, it's like Ritalin versus Valium, and every now and then, maybe you take a bunch of Valium and you get a little bit of a Valium high, but typically you're going to be comatose. You're going to be knocked out. With the Ritalin, you know what it's going to be.
We ought to call you Dr. Great Brian Last.
I got my doctorate from the Mike Lano School of Medicine. But that's what it is. NXT is no better. They're different. They're different levels of suck. Because AEW frustrates you, and it's just, you look at it and you go, how could this be done so poorly? Again, not even talking about the match quality, because I know people love that, and it may not be my cup of tea. I'm not even talking about that. Just the actual booking. Just when something happens 1 week and then there's no clear follow-up, or when they go from A to Z in an angle in one night. It's really, really bad booking. They drop so many things like FTR, they just blew it with. They've done so many stupid things in AEW. That's just really bad booking. NXT, it's like watching fucking Kansas City. Just waiting for something to happen. Just waiting for something.
Kansas City. God, this is boring. The Golden Ox Steakhouse, right across from Kemper Arena in Kansas City, 30-something years ago, was a wonderful place to eat.
Okay.
I was trying to bring the show. This is your show anyway, and I just struck a nerve again. It is, the experience days are tough because we watch those programs, those offerings from the various companies back to back and then talk about them. And it's a depressing day and generally a day where I eat cheeseburgers afterwards.
Again, to bring it back to this, I was so excited to record with you the day after that Cody, Brandy, Jade Gargill, Shaq angle. I couldn't wait. I said, this was so amazing. I can't wait to talk about it. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, I can't wait to see where they're going to go with this. Because if everything they do with this feud is like this, where it's up and down and good and bad all in one segment, which sums up a lot of the Cody segments.
You know where they went?
They went nowhere.
It went away.
The next week, there's a backstage beatdown, or Jade Cargill attacks Brandy at some point. There's a camera just there. That was like...
No, now, hold on now. You're glorifying it. It wasn't that there was an attack. The camera fucking showed up, and there was Jade Cargill in her high platform heels standing on the chair that's already on Brandy's arm, appendage of some description, arm, leg, whatever. And here comes Big Swole to finger pointing everybody, but nobody can touch each other because it wasn't called for in the fucking meetings. So they just looked at each other and walked off. And that's the last we've seen. I'm telling you.
And nothing about Shaq.
I was about to say, I'm telling you, at first I presumed that, okay, Shaq might be involved in this if this is his girlfriend that wants to get into wrestling or something or be a TV star. But no, we found out that's not the case. And nobody's said anything about the big old Shaq attack since then. So, but hopefully we have a better time. See, I wanted to bring you up a little bit for today's program also, Brian, because this is yours. You're fucking this dog. I'm just holding its head on the drive-thru. And you were just remarking to me that you were all verklempt and everything, and energy level was low. And I wanted to pick you up a little bit because I'm sitting here. It's only November 30th and it's snowing in Louisville, Kentucky. That's ridiculous.
How much snow?
Yeah. Well, it's flurrying. I don't know if it'll stick yet, but that's ridiculous. It's only November 30th. Yeah, I don't live in New Jersey where you people are used to getting 3 feet of freaking snow and just have entrances to your house off the second story so that you can just walk out on top of these massive snow drifts you get up there in the fucking polo pony fields.
Is that a question? I don't know.
No, I'm making a statement. It's a big deal to me when it snows on November 30th because I'm not there where there are immense snowfalls and you people just live in igloos.
Well, I'm waiting for snow this year because You know, we moved here to the new Last Manor almost 3 years ago. And at that point, I decided I'm never shoveling snow ever again. I've always shoveled snow. I took a lot of pride in my show snoveling. What did I just say? My snow shoveling, excuse me.
Your show snubbling.
My show snubbling.
But you can take pride in that too, because when you can snubble, you ought to show it off.
I took a lot of pride in my snow shoveling. I would get the entire path. I would get the entire driveway.
Are you kidding me?
Now we have a whole lot more driveway. And I said, this just isn't going to work. I'm never shoveling again. So, of course, that first year I shoveled more than I had in years. Last year, not much snow, but it's still a few times. And I'm getting older. I feel it in my back. So I said, this is the year I am finally buying a snowblower. And I just bought it. It should be here any day now. It'll be arriving in the mail. I got an electric snowblower, so I don't have to mess with the gas.
A snowblower.
A snow.
Well, you guys must get pussy snow up there. We get the hard shit. You have to take a fucking spade shovel to it. None of this plastic shit. You need to get the heavy stuff.
We get heavy snow.
Heavy shit.
You lived in the Northeast. You know we got heavy snow.
Well, it was heavy where I was. It was too heavy where I was. But
what do you mean?
Where are you going to blow the snow?
To the side.
To the side with you, I say. You really went out and
between 14 inches and 2 feet to the side, apparently.
When your previous shoveling days before you became a blower, you would do walkways and the driveway and the whole nine. Are you out of your mind? You could have a heart attack like that. Do you know how much snow? You know how much show that I've snubbled?
How much show have you snubbled?
Do you know how much snow that I have shoveled in the last at least 10 years? Zip, zilch, zero, goose egg, nada, bupkis. And the last time I remember snubbling show, it was more than 10 years ago. Here in Louisville, at one winter time, we had a 20-something inches on the ground at one time, and I had to be able to open a couple of doors. I had to get a shovel and just rake some shit to the side. But otherwise, fuck, you know how I get out if it snows? If I have to go out somewhere, I open a garage door, I fucking start Black Beauty up, I put it in fucking 4-wheel drive, and I gun it backwards. And goddamn it, if there's a foot of snow out there, I'm going through it. And once I get out there on the flat part, then I crank it into drive, and then I eyeball where I think my driveway is, gauging it based on the trees where they're growing, and now my new gate helps keep me right down at that part, and I just drive that way. There's no and I don't want anyone to come up my driveway. It's 200 feet uphill. So if you don't have 4-wheel drive and a big heavy fucking SUV or something, you ain't coming up anyway if it's a big snowfall. So I can get in and out, and it's just an extra level of security, another physical barrier between me and the outside world. But I ain't shoveling any of that shit. You can have a stroke.
I don't disagree with you. The way Suzanne got me a few years ago was explaining to me that the mailman could get hurt. And I was like, oh, I can't do that.
Well, fuck him. Let him fend for himself.
Well, I'm not worried about him fending for himself. It's his attorney that may
tell him to leave the goddamn mail in the box down at the road. That's what it's for.
No, see, I never have had that, and I don't think I could ever deal with that. A mailbox far away from the house.
What?
I've never had a mailbox like on the street, nowhere near the house.
Where are you going to put it?
In the mailbox next to the house, like next to the actual door.
Well, goddamn. Not only then would that require a lot of extra gas usage on the part of the United States Postal Service to drive up and down people's driveways over and over and over again.
I'm not saying they have to do that for everybody. I'm saying I prefer this. I prefer not having a mailbox
so special that he's got to turn in your driveway, pull all the way to your fucking house, stick something right in your door. You know, but
listen.
Now our mailman here is very. Actually, she's a mail lady now. a very nice mail lady, but if we have packages that will not fit in the mailbox, she'll tootle on up the driveway and leave them by the garage or on the porch or whatever the case may be. But for normal circumstances, that's asking these poor mail carriers to go out of their way over and over again just because you want door-to-door service.
Hey, listen, this mailman is the same mailman that we gave a lawnmower to. This is the same mailman who asked if he can go in the woods behind my house and cut some trees.
How did that transaction just come up?
We were going to get rid of the lawnmower because I have a wonderful gardener. I'm never, ever mowing a lawn, ever. Ever. And we're going to get rid of it. And it still works. I just didn't want it. I didn't need it in the shed. So I offered it to the mailman. And he was very, very happy to take it.
So you have this relationship with your mailman where you want a lawnmower?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
I don't think there's anything wrong with giving gifts to the mailman.
He wants a lawnmower.
If anyone deserves a gift, it's the mailman, the wonderful people that work for the U.S. Postal Service.
Yeah, they do deserve a gift for crawling up your driveway through rain and sleet and snow and dark of night to put your shit right next to the door instead of you walking your lazy rich ass down to the road to get it.
You mean like giving them a lawnmower? They deserve a gift like that to do that? So we're even. We're good.
What exactly they might deserve.
This is the same. This is the same guy. This is the same guy.
You give everybody what you deserve, what they deserve.
This is the same guy when we moved in here, and I was asking him because I had noticed in the backyard we always have various different animals. It's like a Disney cartoon back there. All sorts of deers and foxes and all sorts of shit.
It's deer is the plural of deer.
Well, all sorts of deer, my dear. And I said to him, I said, hey, do you think there's anything to worry about with the fox? I've never had foxes on my property, or do you call it just fox? I've never had fox on my property before. Do I have anything to worry about? I have a baby, I have a small dog. And he said, no, I wouldn't worry about them. But I can't even tell you how many people in this neighborhood have Lyme disease. I said, what? How do you do?
Hey.
That's what he said also. He goes, I wouldn't worry about the fox, but you got to watch out for the coyotes. And I said, what? Not even coyotes, coyotes. This guy knows what he's saying.
Well, that's old Gravy Boat Bill. He used to work at the Wild West show doing the shoot 'em ups. Have you had a coyote problem?
I can't say I have, but then again, whenever I see a big fox, I'm like, is that a coyote or is that a fox? But I always go with, I think it's a fox. But there are other people, because we see them in the area, they'll post stuff on the Ring app, like a coyote is on the loose. Watch out. Watch your small dogs.
Well, if it was you'd be able to tell a coyote from a fox because the coyote always is accompanied by a large crate from Acme Incorporated. So you'd be able to tell, or if he had any, box traps or ropes and pulleys, metal bird seed and large magnets, things of that nature. Then that's the way you differentiate the fox from the regular, or the coyotes from the regular foxes.
I thought of you. Speaking of animals, I thought of you this weekend.
What the? What kind of goddamn segue is speaking
Listen.
Filthy, dirty, wild, feral beast.
Well, actually,
I was thinking of you.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. This weekend on CBS Sunday Morning, a fine program I watch each and every Sunday morning when I can, they did a feature about raccoons. And I thought of you.
What the?
For when that raccoon got in your house and started destroying everything.
I have one interaction, albeit a slightly spectacular one, more of a stir than most raccoon interactions cause, but I have one interaction with a raccoon, and forevermore you link me in your mind whenever you see a raccoon.
It turns out they're not actually washing their food. They have special whatever the hell in their hands so they can put them in the water and feel in the dirt and feel the food that they feed themselves. But a lot of people have the misconception, I should say, that they are actually washing their food. They're not. They're dirty animals.
Well, I'm glad you straightened that out. I could tell you that because I found actual goddamn raccoon shit from that raccoon on one of the cardboard moving boxes that I just pulled out of my office closet here about 3 weeks ago when I was moving some stuff around. He shit on my end table, shit on my curtains. when the cops hit him with the flashlights, hit him with the light beam, not the actual clip.
Get him! Get the flashlight! Hit him!
Hit the. When they turned the lights upon him, it frightened him in such a manner that he leaped from the table to the curtains to the boxes and running around shitting along his route. And I thought I'd gotten all of it, but that was 2005, and I just found one of his shitty boxes.
Which wrestler had a pet raccoon he would bring to the ring? I don't remember.
Oh God! Whiskers. There was Whiskers Savage, but because there were so many.
They had pigs, I know. Yeah.
Well, the hillbilly guys at various points, I've seen pictures. Whether sometimes they did the possum. There's pictures with possums. Sometimes it was pigs. A lot of times the small pig, not the giant 600-pound pig. But along that, Whiskers Savage did something of that nature, maybe even more than one animal in his days in Texas. Did he not?
I was going to say Farmer Marlin, but I don't think that would be right. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Well, it wasn't Farmer Burns.
No, it certainly was not Farmer
much.
Burns. Yes.
No. He was a serious farmer. He wasn't any farmer to jack around with, was Farmer Burns.
You know what? I can admit that I didn't know until recently, and I feel a little embarrassed, but I never saw footage of these guys, and I only know the name from hearing about them. I never realized there were two different sets of Scufflin' Hillbillies.
What?
I just never thought about it long enough, and then recently I was going through my Scufflin' Hillbillies file, and it's like, these are two different teams.
Wait a minute, and there's a phrase that has not been used by anyone on this planet. In the last 20 years, I was going through my Scufflin' Hillbillies file. Continue, please.
Well, that's really it. I was going through different files, and I saw Scufflin' Hillbillies, and all I was thinking was, I've always heard how Vince McMahon loved the Scufflin' Hillbillies. I've never seen any footage of them. Let me look at these pictures. And I start pulling out pictures. There's a different team in the 60s and a different team in the 70s, and I just never, ever realized it. I never had thought too much about it. I'd never thought about it at all, actually. And then I looked and I saw it and I was like, wow, I never realized two different teams.
I have met and talked to one of the original Scufflin' Hillbillies because they were from, at least he was, Chuck Conley was from Ashland, Kentucky. But the original Scufflin' Hillbillies were Rip Collins and Chuck Conley, right?
Yeah.
And that was the team that sold out Madison Square Garden and was big in the Northeast. That was the first hillbilly team. That was why they got over and why Vince remembered it and et cetera, because they did big business. In New York, they thought, they did the stereotype hillbilly from the 1920s, but, New York wasn't up on Appalachian culture at that point. And, oh, God, who was their manager? Was the first run, was it Cousin Alfred? I can't remember, but at any rate, and of course Vince Jr. redid the whole thing with a bigger budget and more people in the 80s with Hillbilly Jim and Cousin Jr. and Uncle Elmer.
And then Cousin Luke when Cousin Jr. left.
Cousin Luke when they lost Cousin Jr. Well, they always, they have big families down there in the hills. But anyway, Rip Collins and Chuck Conley were the originals, and Chuck actually used to come to the Crockett matches in Huntington, West Virginia, which is right across the river from Ashland in the 80s. And we got it, they were big. They were never, how to say this charitably. I mean, it's not like I saw their matches every night, but it wasn't like they were a revolutionary team in the ring like the Graham brothers or whatever the case. But they were two guys that happened to fit the bill and got the gimmick, and they got a big push up there. And then for the next, several years off of that, because they could say, they had been to Madison Square Garden and drew these big houses in the Northeast, because they didn't just work New York, they worked the whole Northeast. And they had a name in the business at that time, and they worked other smaller territories for several years off of that. But I don't think anybody ever said that they were Bockwinkel and Stevens, but it was they had a nice run, and Chuck was a nice guy. And then later on in the 70s, Was it Chuck that got another partner? Did they redo the whole team to be? You've got the files now. Take over now with your knowledge, Mr. Wrestling News Archive owner.
Well, I don't have the files in front of me. They are downstairs in the files.
Well, you should have had it memorized.
Well, I didn't have it memorized. So I think it was a completely different tag team. I'm looking it up right now to see what I could find. I did want to ask you a brief question while I'm looking for this, though. You brought up that he would sometimes go to the shows when you work for Crockett. Obviously, there are guys who work for the office or were involved with an office for a long period of time who may show up frequently. You know, at Madison Square Garden, you hear about, like, Chris Candido's grandfather, Chuck Richards, would show up at the shows all the time. Like, there are those kind of guys. But, and let's say the 80s, would you ever get, I mean, were there guys who would just show up like a one-off? Like, oh my God, I can't believe this person is here. And then you never see them again? Were there guys from the past, like from 20 or 30 years earlier, who would just show up? They wanted to be around for a night?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, like, you know, when we went out to Amarillo in 86, late 86, early 87, because Dennis Condrey was still with us. We were there, you know, for the show for Crockett, and Don Fargo walked in. What the Don Fargo of all people we obviously Dennis and Bobby had worked with him in the past. I had not seen him or talked to him since I got in the business, but as a photographer, he had a knowledge of who I was, right? But who would have thought Don Fargo would walk in Amarillo? And that's where I've told you the story before. He was living with a motorcycle gang there. And he'd sit on the fucking porch and drink beer and watch. They were so taken with him being a famous wrestler that they would wrestle for him. And he said, yeah, these subbitches are taking body slams on the gravel driveway. It's fucking great. I'm sitting back and watch. They're not smart. You know, and you know, we took some pictures with him. I still have to this day. But Mike Boyette one time happened to be living in San Antonio. And came by, we were at the Hemisphere, and goddamn, I got such a huge kick out of him. And I managed him as Apocalypse, the Soldier of Fortune in Memphis early in my career. I was just talking to Bobby Fulton a couple weeks ago about that, where he's the only guy I've ever seen, Mike Boyette, when he was Apocalypse, that won a match and caused a career-ending injury from the match-winning move. He was going to do his diving headbutt off the second rope, because off top rope was illegal in those days. Off second rope, doing the diving headbutt to poor Bobby Fulton, who was just underneath babyface at the time. And he was working barefoot. He was working in combat boots originally, but they're like, fuck. You know, and he came in one day and he started to like fucking getting dressed, and he was barefoot. I said, what happened? He looked at me, he said, they told me to take my boots off. They said they were made out of potatoes. So he starts wrestling barefoot. So he's up on the fucking ropes barefoot, and his left foot slips as he goes to jump, and he went sideways and speared Bobby Fulton's midsection with the side of his head and jammed his neck and fucked his neck up. And it knocked the breath out of Bobby. So that he fucking lamely covers Bobby, and Bobby can't kick out anyway because he got no fucking breath, right? He got speared off the second rope head first in the gut. 1, 2, 3, and they're both laying there selling. And I've only been in the business 6 months, so I fucking roll in the ring, and Mike has just now turned over on his knees, and I grab his arm and fucking yank his arm up in the air. Yeah, he's the winner, and it was the fucking side he'd hurt his neck on. He was, oh, goddamn. And he pulls it back down. He's holding his arm. He's selling. Bobby is turned over, face down on the mat, can't get fucking up. I'm the only one that's still fucking mobile. And ended up, he hurt his fucking, I don't think he ever worked again. If he did, it wasn't.
Yes, he did.
Did he?
Remember, he had a losing streak in the UWF.
That's right. He came back, what was that, in 87?
86, 87, yeah.
Okay, well, this was 82 when that happened in Memphis. And as a matter of fact, son of a gun, when we were at the Hemisphere, maybe it didn't work. And I'm going to get a moral to this story here in a second, but he showed up in San Antonio. It was a Crockett show. And a bunch of the boys, you know, enjoyed seeing him and talking to him. But, you know, Mike Boyette was a guy that could hang almost with Chris Colt as far as being and they were partners at one time, although not long, obviously. as far as just being out there mentally, but he showed up in San Antonio. It looked like he had been literally digging holes for a living. He was covered in mud from head to toe and boots and work shit. And, and I don't know whether he was trying to get booked or what, but shortly after that was where he did the thing in the UWF. But to answer your question, yes, you would see guys in general. I'll answer your question. You would see guys show up at shows every once in a while if they lived in the area and they either knew some of the guys that were on the card, even though they were currently retired or whatever, or out of the business. They knew some of the guys that worked with them, or every once in a while the promoter or the booker might invite them down. Because I've met Sam Mineker. The only time I ever met Sam Mineker when I was actually in the business, he was living in El Paso, and when we were in World Class, they ran what's the Army base out there? Fort Bliss. Fort Bliss is an Army base that, if that's the one that's near El Paso, we had an afternoon show there, and Sam Mineker walks in, the first wrestling announcer I ever saw. And so I marked out a little bit and shook hands with him, told him I, started watching the program when he was in Indianapolis and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, it was guys that, that would have some connection and would come every once in a while, but if they were guys in that position, they wouldn't come every week. You wouldn't. If somebody was coming every week, it either meant they wanted a job or they need to be buying a ticket, right? And that's what I was told early on. Dennis Condrey, as a matter of fact, is one that taught me this, probably. If it wasn't Frank Morrell, you never went to a show. When you're active in the business, never go to a show if you're not booked. Unless you're so big they'd love to have you and they can't afford you, because then it looks like you're looking for a job. And especially if you are looking for a job, they'll know that they can pay you less because you're looking for a job. Now they always tell the guys the exact opposite. Just show up and be seen. But in those days, in the territory days, when obviously they weren't just going to hire anybody because, we're short somebody, bring in the understudy. No, everybody was a wrestler, wanted a job in a territory. So it eventually shook out that, the guys, the last resort was Kansas City. If you couldn't get booked regular there, you might just think about going home and doing jobs locally. So in those days, you didn't show up if you were active in the business unless you were invited by the office or the booker, or you knew somebody figured in and, you were trying to make some specific arrangement. You didn't just wander in. It looked needy.
I have an update on the Scufflin' Hillbillies.
Okay.
The originals were Rip Collins and Chuck Connolly.
Yes.
The second version, and this is interesting, I didn't realize this. The manager was Cousin Alfred.
Okay.
Cousin Slim, who was Marvin Cheatham. And Cousin Willie, who was Billy Garrett.
They didn't last long.
Well, Billy Garrett was one of the interns, wasn't he?
He was for a little while.
Yeah.
But they didn't last long as the Scufflin' Hillbillies, because there was another set of Scufflin' Hillbillies that worked for Phil Golden's All-Star Wrestling, and I don't have my files in front of me, but I think Chuck was part of that team with another partner, and they had a manager who was a cousin. So there were probably at least two sets but the big set of Scufflin' Hillbillies was Rip and Chuck by Cracky.
Well, Jim, if I was the type to get a Christmas gift for Vince McMahon, which I'm not, I may recommend a new plastic surgeon. I may recommend a nap. But perhaps I would get him a picture of a tag team he loved in his childhood, the Scufflin' Hillbillies, perhaps many photos from my files, and I would send them right to a skylight frame.
That was a wonderful thought, Brian Last, and I will second that emotion, because if you want to give somebody in your social circle, family, or close COVID-free bubble, or even a billionaire wrestling promoter, a great gift for the holidays, our friends at Skylight Frames can hook you up. And folks, we've been talking about them on the program. It's not a frame for just one picture. It's a photo frame that you can have updated instantly by email from anywhere. People can email you multiple photos as long as you give them the information, and they can pop up instantly on the Skylight frame. You can zip through them. You can put them on the slideshow. You can thank people for sending them. You can tap the picture and just say, hey, thanks. Boom, all this stuff. And there's 100% satisfaction guarantee. If you don't love the skylight frame, then they'll give you a full refund. You can load it up with your favorite pictures and then send it to someone, whether it be family or friends or pets or whatever. I don't mean you send it to a pet. You should put a picture of your pet on and send it to a member of your family. Do these things right. Anyway, you can bring pictures of yourself and your significant other, spouse, grandparent, whatever, all into this thing, and you can send them out willy-nilly. And we've already mentioned that I'm sure somebody is going to figure out in this pandemic age how to send pictures of themselves to a significant other that deserve to be framed in a frame as nice and stylish as this. Whether they're crying tears of joy or screaming in orgasmic pleasure, folks, they're going to love the skylight frame. And right now, as a special offer, you can get 10% off your purchase of a skylight frame when you go to skylightframe.com. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com, skylightframe.com. Everybody knows that. And enter the code DRIVE. $10 off a skylight frame at skylightframe.com. Enter the code DRIVE. For heaven's sake, these are brilliant. And Brian, you've already done the whole thing for your family and your dad, and you've got one there, as I've mentioned, with the pictures of yourself at various moments of triumph in your life.
That's not true, but I have just bought another one recently. So now I have one for me, and I've purchased two as gifts for family.
Yes, and you've loaded them with pictures of yourself that slide back and forth in some scenes of your greatest triumphs, and you give them to your family members so that they can remember how great you are.
This sounds like something Jim Cornette would do.
You know, as a matter of fact, that's a pretty good segue there, Brian Last, because...
It is? I mean, it is.
I lost.
Are you wrestling that paper? What's going on?
Well, it jumped up and magically almost flew away from me. I had to get it here. I keep it right next to my heart. But I got an email from a young lady, and the subject line intrigued me. It said, Cornette obsessed boyfriend, a girlfriend's rant. And so I decided to check this out, and it's from, I will use no last names, but it's from Renata. And she said, Dear Jim, week after week, car ride after car ride, I am what I call a casualty of the cult of Cornette. I guess enduring hours of wrestling commentaries is what some find entertaining. I'm not one of those people. And the only reason I listen is because the man I love is unquestionably obsessed with what you have to say. And as the great singer Meatloaf, sarcasm, says, I will do anything for love. Now, to be fair, it's not all a complete torture, especially when you rip on Trump or Kenny Omega. But overall, my brain is on wrestling overload, and frankly, I am over it. I understand this little note I'm sending you may be construed as insulting. Oh, no, heaven forbid. No. So I guess asking you for a shout out to my man for his birthday may not be your priority after reading it. However, I feel this will be an adequate consolation for the hours I have endured listening to you unwillingly. Anyways, his name is Tony Palucky. Hey, Tony, you want to get lucky? There's old Lucky Palucky. I'm sure he got through school just fine. And his birthday is December 7th. So it would really tickle my fancy if you could mention him on your next podcast. And yes, I am aware of the Cult of Cornette membership certificate. $12, really? That's a little steep, don't you think? Yeah, but it's only $2 shipping. But she goes on to say, and I already purchased it, so your shout out would be an icing on the cake. So Tony Palucky, it tickles Renata's fancy that I am now mentioning you. Happy birthday, and see if you can take over the tickling from here. And I'll get that membership certificate out as quickly as possible. They're out there. They're being forced to listen, Brian. But you know, it's here's the thing. It's you give and you take in the relationship. You give and you take. We don't want to put the seat down, but we do. Except in my toilet in the bathroom in my office. Anyway.
You keep that one up?
You're damn skippy, I do.
All right. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you about toilets. Let's.
I don't want to just go in there and just piss all over what I'm going to be sitting on later on.
What kind of name is Polucky?
I think it's Bosnian.
Oh.
Yeah. But anyway, she mentioned, by the way, she bought the Cult of Cornette membership certificate. A lot of other people have. Let's just get this out of the way right now. The conveyor belt has sped up considerably, folks. I've been saying it for the last few weeks. With the situation with the Postal Service being overloaded at Christmas season, with me being only one man, I suggested everybody get your orders in by no later than December 10th if you wanted it for Christmas. I'm going to amend that to December 7th, a date which will live in infamy. If you're going to be a customer at JimCornette.com, and so many of you have been, and I do appreciate you, my eyes are bleeding. I have your names all indelibly etched on my psyche as I've read your names and filled your orders over the past many, many days. But if you want it by Christmas, please get everything in JimCornette.com by December 7th. So I've got a turnaround time of at least a week, and then can get it to you get it into the post office before the official deadlines, which, as we've established, are caca. And inside sources are saying allow 2 more days at least for shit that they say will get there by Christmas. So that's the only plug I'm going to give for the collectibles which sell themselves, except please. So everybody has a nice Merry Christmas. If you're I'm not even trying to twist your arm here, but if you're going to purchase something, do it by December 7th so I can get it to you before the holidays. And that's domestically in the United States. The international folks, I'll fill them, but don't look for them at this point till probably close to New Year or after, just with the whole, everything internationally has been slowed down this year because of the COVIDs. That's all I got, Brian. This is your show.
All right, well, let's get to some questions finally. It's only been 45 minutes.
How much longer can we go without having to talk about anything going on in the modern world?
Well, this first question was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Zishan in Karachi, Pakistan. Why is Vince McMahon insistent on scripted promos when he himself knows that the best promos wrestlers did were not scripted by him or anyone else? Case in point, Austin 316, or If You Smell What the Rock Is Cooking, etc. Plus, it also robs the wrestler of his personality.
Well, I agree with all of that. And Vince knew that 25 years ago, and it wasn't like that one day he just suddenly changed his mind. We've forgotten this was a process. The whole idea of exchanging is still until myself and Bruce Pritchard were both off creative and Shitstain and Ferrara took over. And well, they didn't take over because it was Vince's crew. But when Vince started the nucleus of them writing the shows, that's the first time that non-wrestling people had been allowed to be his creative team. There may have been one on a team at some point in time. I don't know, but I can't even call that person's name. But non-wrestling people, and then they do it for a while, and then, you know, when they leave and go to WCW, then he's getting. Meanwhile, he's had a few other people filter in there. He's went the direction of Stephanie, who had just graduated college. So, well, let's make her the head of creative. And that's not even a knock on Stephanie. I just don't see how, you know, that wouldn't have happened without her proper last name, that she would suddenly take over creative when I can't remember what she studied in college, but I don't even think it was writing, was it? She just was around now. But anyway,
I believe it was botany.
Botany. There you go. And then, of course, she wants it to be a television company and starts hiring not only, you know, TV writers, but non-wrestling people who have degrees in these things. And Vince is still at that time knew the top guys. that can talk and have personalities. You let them do their thing, but gradually it started from the bottom up. Well, the fucking underneath guys will script this stuff because Vince doesn't care anyway. It's not that he doesn't care whether the guy lives or dies, but he doesn't care what. I guarantee you during the Attitude Era, it was very difficult to get Vince McMahon to listen to what fucking Kai and Tai might be going to do on the program. As long as the, pay-per-view was getting sold and the main event stars were taken care of, he'd let other people fill that shit in. So then it started gradually as it was never a thing that we did in OVW developmental, but as they started their own developmental, that was a thing. They started training guys that here's your script. And they started even letting guys call it a script. I used to threaten guys with fines if they called a television format in the wrestling industry a script. And it was a slow, it like crept up like fungus grows. And also it was aided by so many more guys getting in the business and not having any fucking personality. Because we hit the fucking trained monkey era where everybody wanted to be the flying Walindas on the trapeze and get into business to do cool moves in front of their friends in the rec center. And though, so they need to be told what to say. Some of them on NXT still obviously need to be told what to say. So it just took over. It took years and years, but that's kind of the way it happened. The conditions just got right that people outside wrestling were given for the first time creative positions within it. And then it was fostered by the new younger generation of McMahons thinking that they were, they're going to be a big television company and not just wrestling anymore. And then a bunch of colorless jackoffs that want to get into business that can't tell a goddamn story to save their life and sit on their phone and fucking noodle all day instead of fucking figuring out how to get themselves over as some kind of personality. And then they pay the writers a lot of money, so they got to justify their existence. And that's how it happened.
How much of it do you think is a control thing from Vince?
Well, at this point, he probably is, instead of that, he's probably going, God, I wish I had guys like Hulk. They could really just take this shit and run with it. He probably wants somebody to come out there and fucking do better shit than is written for him. But it still needs to, be within the parameters of what Vince wants. And that's, that used to be a great thing. It's the same thing Austin did. The same thing all those guys did. But now I don't know what he wants. Maybe he don't know what he wants. And none of these guys look like, for the most part, they can give it to him. If Damian Priest, could probably fucking cut loose and be something. But the rest of it, Vince probably looks like, God damn, what am I running here? Make-A-Wish?
Did anyone ever say anything to you when you were up there about what it was like when they were doing Saturday Night's Main Event on NBC? Because those were, I believe, scripted promos that were on that show, which was obviously produced by Dick Ebersol.
Yes.
Was anything ever said to you about that?
Well, yeah, and Bruce did a lot of those. Or produced, stuff for a lot of those, or was involved as Brother Love or whatever. And hey, they liked that shit because it was network TV and blah, blah, blah. And I get NBC was not going to let just a bunch of fucking wrestlers make shit up. I think they even have run-throughs of Saturday Night Live and still get shit by, right? But they always liked it that way because it was real television, network TV, and, blah, blah, blah. It's always the direction that Bruce loved that kind of shit. They wanted the show business. I wanted the wrestling and just, broadcast it to a wide audience. They wanted the show business.
Well, speaking of Vince McMahon, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Denny in Birmingham, England. I noticed your last comments on Vince McMahon's appearance on Survivor Series, but neither you or Brian mentioned the blatant plastic surgery Vince has had. He looked weird because he didn't look natural. My question is, Jim, do you know, other than Buff Bagwell's ridiculous calf implants, do you know of any of the boys that took plastic surgery or cosmetic alteration to make them look better? By the way, Vince McMahon was clearly plastic surgery'd up. not makeup boy, what does this say? Not makeup boy hundreds of thousands of dollars on plastic surgery, but I'm surprised you guys didn't mention it.
Well, I mean, I'm not an expert, so I was struck, impressed. It made an impression on me of how much makeup he was wearing, and that he seems to have lost a little oomph in his face, and he looks more like his dad did, even though it's taken him, 20 years longer to get there, and just wasn't a commanding presence like he used to be. What would he have had plastic surgery on? Maybe his eyes, but I mean, it's not. He still has wrinkles, so I'm trying to. It doesn't look like that cat woman that try to get transformed into a cat or whatever. What do you think he's had worked on?
I don't know. There's clearly a lot going on with his face right now.
Well, I mean, because I hadn't seen him in years, and then I saw him. I don't know, people age. He's 75 or whatever. I don't know what he has had or would have had worked on.
He really looks like, it's funny this happened, he really looks like that puppet on Firefly Funhouse. He's literally turned into that. That's what he looks like now.
I just, I don't remember anybody else. Maybe it's because in wrestling, nobody ever stayed in the public eye this long. Can you think of another big star, major? Because I consider
Chris
Vince
Jericho.
A star in wrestling. Well, God damn it.
Jericho.
No.
He's got Botox forehead.
But you don't know where I was going.
Oh.
With that, we've seen a bunch of people become past their prime expiration date canned hams of the world, as poor Chris is now. But I'm talking about, has any major wrestling star ever still been on television and, involved in some way when they were actually as 75 and had changed so much and had transformed? That's what I'm trying to think of. Vince has had more longevity than just about anybody.
Well, there have been guys.
I mean, Lawler's only 5 years younger than Vince is, but Lawler's Lawler. I mean, I'm sure he's.
I was going to say Lawler, and
he's had some things worked on, but fuck, he doesn't have anything bionic. Lawler still can have a fucking match and throw a drop kick. I think he'll look better at 75 than Vince does now, even though Vince had the physique advantage all those years. Maybe that's the reason why Lawler looks better now.
And I think Lawler had a good doctor, because it appears that Lawler and Ric Flair both had face work done, but Lawler just looks like another version of Lawler. Flair, it did radically change the way he looked, I thought.
I just, what did he have done? 'Cause I don't know these things.
His face.
Well, I mean, what part of he still got a
facelift?
He would. If you would have told people 30 years ago he was going to have anything done, Arn would have said, well, hey, get that fucking nose shaved down. He used to call Flair Beak. Hey, Beak.
Did he have a nickname for everyone?
He had a nickname for everybody. Nikita was Cue Ball, and then when we started wearing the nice, expensive suits, he became GQ Ball. And
Tully was Wombat.
Wombat. Or Eddie Munster, depending on the fucking... and Bobby was Butte. But anyway, nevertheless, I don't know. But all I'm saying is Lawler has somehow managed physically to defy time to that level, and even died. Still didn't fucking hurt him. But Vince he had that commanding presence, whether on television or in person, when he walked in the room and he had the voice and he stood up straight and you knew it. And he was always had this serious gravitas to him. And now it's a shocking change, and I feel bad for him.
He kind of looks like Mr. Peanut now.
With the monocle and a top hat?
He's looks like shriveled up. He's like a shriveled up old Vince McMahon.
Come on. He can still kick the shit out of any other 75-year-old man except for Vern Gagne.
I'm off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of 75-year-olds who I would put up against Vince. I don't know.
It's tough. Well, wait a minute.
I'll put Sylvester Stallone against Vince.
Hold
I'll take
on.
Stallone.
Well, I'm just thinking Dundee, I think, is 75 now. Bill Dundee, if he hit Vince with one of his working punches, he'd go down still to this day.
I would take Dundee over Vince in a fight right now.
Yeah. You would, because...
Here's a big question for you. Bill Watts has cracked 80. Do you think Bill Watts?
That's right.
Do you think he could still throw a punch?
I'm pretty sure he could. I'm pretty sure. Well, a working punch or a real punch?
A punch.
Or both.
Well, was there a difference? A real punch.
Well,
a real punch.
I was going to say, at least he would try not to hurt you. The result would be similar, but he'd try with a working punch not to. Actually, you know what? Drop kick. It was a rip. I can't remember who he was working with when he did this, but he told Bobby and Dennis the story before the last Stampede matches, so they knew what was up when he called it. But apparently he had been working with a guy, and as he shot the guy off, it was a main event, and it was somebody that he was fucking, on the same level as Watts, wasn't just telling the boss what to do or whatever. He's shooting the guy off, and the guy said, "Hit me with a drop kick." And so when the guy came back, Watts just drew back and punched him right in the fucking face. He said, "That's my drop kick, motherfucker." So he started it when he's making his comeback after Dog would give him the iceberg tag, because Dog at that point was fucking coked out and was not present mentally in some of those matches. But Watson started making his comeback, boom, 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 and he'd shoot Bobby or Dennis, either one off, and he'd say, "Drop kick," and they'd, "Oh, shit," and they'd come back and he'd punch him right in the fucking face. And then he had this spot he wanted to do for Dennis to get his color, right, where he would punch Dennis, and Dennis take a bump and turn over on his hands and knees, and Watts would come and throw a football kick to Dennis's forehead. And he was like, oh, he was going to come right over the edge of the forehead, right? He said, "You'll never feel it." First time he did it, bam! Dennis said he saw so many stars he couldn't find his fucking blade. And so every night for the first 3 or 4 nights, he'd get his juice that way, because he got juice on Bobby and Dennis in each match of the, what do we have, 15, double juice on both of them in each one of the matches. But the people had to get what they paid for. Anyway, by the 3rd or 4th match, no, God, it was deeper into it than that. But still, with like 6 or 7 of them left, Watts tore his hamstring. And that's what we went in the Superdome, the tape from the Superdome that still exists of that match. Watts has his thigh taped from the knee to his fucking crotch, because he had tore his fucking thigh muscle, his quad or whatever. And so Dennis said, "God damn it." He said he was kicking me in the head so hard it tore his fucking muscle. So then Dennis had to get on his hands and knees even lower for Watts to kick him, because he couldn't get his foot up off the ground. But anyway, drop kick.
Do you think anyone has the guts to say to Vince, "Vince, you look ridiculous, that you got to do something else if you're going to be on camera"?
No, well, he doesn't look ridiculous. He's not wearing the New Day's, entrance costume.
Did you see his eyebrows?
I saw the eyebrows were ridiculous. He looks like an old man, and the one guy that everybody that knew him thought would never age, and the one guy that they've seen with all that vim and vigor on television, even if you've never met him or seen him in person, I think it's just, at this point, it may be to have him stand in the ring and do the same type of delivery, or deliver the message the same kind of way. It might be it's a bummer now. Maybe he should be in a boardroom setting with the table and the chair or whatever. I mean, make use of, he's the most famous wrestling personality they still have in the company. Make use of him, but don't have him doing the same kind of shit he used to do, because then you're comparing it to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And anybody's going to lose something.
Well, perhaps Vince is a little upset because he's not a young man anymore, and it really has to get to him that he's not as strong as he once was. He's not as youthful as he once was, probably doesn't have the energy he once did, and he has to reconcile with that. He has to sit down and think about that every time he does something on camera. If only there was a place he can call. If only there was someone he could speak to about whatever issues he's going through right now.
Actually, I thought you were going, I was like, wait a minute, did we accept the daggum dick pills around here? But no, you're talking more mental, a way to mentally come to grips with his current situation. Folks, if you need somebody to talk to, a licensed and professional therapist, not just some shade tree therapist, but somebody to talk to whether it's not available in your area, your locale, whether you don't want to go out and sit in waiting rooms and be in public in the middle of a pandemic, whether you prefer to maintain your anonymity, your anonymity, your anonymousness, your anonymity, that's it, right? Whether you prefer to remain anonymous or even under the cover of darkness, folks, no matter what, our friends at BetterHelp can help you. You can start communicating in under 48 hours with a licensed professional therapist. It's professional counseling done securely online, and there's a broad range of expertise available. Services available worldwide because it's by internet, video, phone sessions, all done online if necessary. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if needed to make sure you find the right fit. Folks, you can go to their website and read the testimonials that people post every day on how BetterHelp has made a difference for them. We've read some of the emails from folks that have written in from the cult of Cornett that have used the service. If you go to BetterHelp, that's HELP, betterhelp.com/drive, you can join the over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional and get 10% off your first month's services. BetterHelp.com/drive, 10% off the first month. You can't beat that. And you don't have to leave the house. We're searching for these ways that you can stay healthy and alone and anonymous.
Hey, can I ask you something to follow up on something you just said before? The last Stampede matches.
If I still remember it, yes, you can.
The Junkyard Dog is Stagger Lee, and he returns to team with Bill Watts against the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette. You brought up his state during those matches and how he was coked up at times. How much of that did Watts understand? Was Watts hip to the idea that this guy's on drugs and he's messed up? Did Watts just think he's overweight and he's not into it anymore? I mean, we know now the way things were going, looking back. But in that moment in 1984, how aware was Bill Watts of the condition of the Junkyard Dog? And he would leave just a few months later. I mean, what was the relationship that you witnessed between Watts and the dog at that point in 84?
Well, in the ring, at one point, I saw him give Watts a tag where he just kind of, one of the Midnight Express, or maybe both of them, they'd had some kind of double knockout and they were both down. And Dog, instead of making any effort to make it a hot tag, just stood up and turned around and just stuck his hand out to Watts. And Watts looked at it like he'd offered him a fucking handful of cow shit and just bam, like motherfucker, and got in. And another time, he, in the finish or after, there was the afterbirth, Dog was supposed to slingshot me in over the top rope so that they could strip my clothes off and blah, blah, blah. And I'm standing there in the middle of the ring waiting for this big 280-pound guy to slingshot me in over the top rope. And he's standing by the turnbuckles and he's so blown up from the match that they had that he really didn't need to be that blown up from the match that he had. That he just stood there and just kind of grabbed the top rope, and I'm 10 feet away, and I've got to launch myself in. Watts knew by that point. Well, Grizzly Smith knew what was going on. I mean, he may not have known the exact quantity of substances that Dog was ingesting at that point in time, but he knew what he was doing because everybody in New Orleans kind of got the picture, as I believe you brought up on one of your shows. Didn't you have on somebody that from New Orleans or read an email?
Yeah. Professor Ricardo Coleman. Ricardo Coleman, who lived in the projects in New Orleans, and he said that in 83, word started going around that the Junkyard Dog was being spotted in the projects, and people figured out why he was there, and Pee Wee Anderson was with him as his bag man. And around that period of time was when he started gaining weight. And if you watch Mid-South Wrestling from that time period, on commentary, Watts is trying to cover for it. He's bulking up because he's facing all these big guys like the one-man gang in Kamala. He's picking up weight so that he'll have an equal advantage with these guys. He's trying to cover for it. But that was one of the big things I thought was interesting, was talking to someone from New Orleans, from the projects in New Orleans. I got a very different perspective on the rise and fall of Junkyard Dog than people from outside the territory who look back and go, oh, well, it's very simple. He got out of shape, he did drugs, and then he lost to Mr. Wrestling 2 and it was all over. Actually, it seems like it was starting to be over to a lot of those fans in 83, especially. It was a very small community. I mean, it was a lot of people, but word got around that Junkyard Dog was hanging out around the projects.
Well, and see, that's the thing when they started to lose, is the same thing happened when they started to hear the news about the Von Erich boys, the bad news, when it started getting out and it started to lose faith. Remember when they ran, well, and let me, first of all, what you said earlier, yes, Watts, to answer the question you asked before I go off in a different direction, Watts knew, but he had not seen firsthand like some of the boys were seeing, or even like Grizzly could explain to him, because Watts went to TV in Shreveport once every 2 weeks. Watts was at every Oak City and or Tulsa event every 2 weeks. And Watts got the reports from Grizzly and occasionally, obviously, was at the Superdome, but he didn't go to the Towns night. You couldn't. At that point, especially the boss wasn't going to make that fucking schedule. It was goddamn insane. So when he finally got in the ring, you could see when he got in the ring and was having to work with Dog in those matches and see it up close. And then, like you said, it wasn't a couple. He probably said something because he knew that he was having his bad habits and he was getting out of shape and etc. But it didn't dawn on him it had gone this far until in the record crowds in his entire territory, Dog just was not in any kind of good shape. But having said that, going back to New Orleans, you got to remember New Orleans was a different type of town than anywhere else in the country for wrestling, because they literally had 3 different crowds.
That's right.
In the downtown auditorium, that was a place a lot of people from the suburbs didn't want to fucking go to. It was a dangerous area. We saw the cops on horseback, dispersing the crowds from that area. It was downtown. It was tough parking, etc. It was a predominantly, middle or lower income African American, especially when Dog got hot. When he was selling that building out, it would be a predominantly black audience from inner city New Orleans. And they came week after week after week to see the Dog. And they would come by bus. There wasn't a lot of parking down there because it was downtown New Orleans. But they would come by bus or they could walk or whatever. So they're drawing thousands of people that when they would get off dates on the St. Bernard Civic Center, which was a place that seated 2,500 or so, and when they couldn't get the auditorium because it was booked or whatever, they'd go out there. That was out in St. Bernard Parish. They would draw a different type of crowd, which was more of the Cajun and just white, lower income crowd there. When they started booking shows at the UNO Lakefront Arena that was out in the suburbs, was the University of New Orleans, a beautiful 8,000 seat building. They started really running that in 84. They may have done it a time or two before, but started in 84. And we would do sometimes 5,000 or 6,000 people in that building. And not a one of them were people that were going to the matches at the downtown municipal auditorium, except for the same girls, right? Because they went everywhere. And then when they'd run the Superdome, that's when everybody would come. Everybody that came to the UNO Lakefront could go to the Superdome because the Superdome is the biggest building, nicest place in town in those days. The downtown audience could go because it was downtown. They could walk. They could take the bus. And the St. Bernard people would come because we'll drive to the Superdome. And there was plenty of parking and blah, blah, blah. So they ran New Orleans. It was a $1 million a year town. But there were several different wrestling crowds in that same city, and it depended on what building they ran as to which ones came.
Well, Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Kevin Pierpont.
That's got to be a made-up name.
It appears to be a genuine name. What makes you say that?
Pierpont.
Pierpont Morgan.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's latching on to the Morgan bandwagon there. What's his middle name? Hotchkiss?
Do you ever go to the Morgan Museum and Library in New York City. Well, who am I asking?
What did you just say? The museum?
You've never gone there ever.
Did you say, do you with your New Jersey accent?
New York accent.
Just say, or New York accent, just say museum?
I said the museum.
You said the museum.
Have you ever gone to the Morgan Museum and Library? I know the answer because you don't go anywhere in New York but your apartment, or your hotel room, I should say.
Yeah, it's safer there.
It is really cool. It is the
and the Carnegie Deli, but they fucked that up too.
Well, yeah, it's gone now.
Yeah.
But no, the Morgan Museum and Library is his actual residence on Madison Avenue in Manhattan. It was the first, illuminated building in New York City. And they built a library attachment to it. Or they built a museum library, a museum attachment to his library, but it's his original study, his original library, all the books in his library. It's really, really cool. One of the coolest places to visit. And it's at times during the year free on Fridays. But anyway, let's get our next question.
Wait a minute. I got some breaking news. I got some breaking news here. Hold on here. I'm just looking at this because I was actually zoning out and not really giving a shit about what you were saying. And okay, now this is on the internet. Anthony Anzaldo. Do you know that name?
It's not ringing a bell.
Apparently, he actually used to work at Notre Dame. He has his hunch on his back. And Anthony Anzaldo, the former manager of the late WWF superstar Chyna, has made a shocking statement that the ninth wonder of the world was originally meant to be WWF champion. In 2000, following the decline of Degeneration X and the uprising of the McMahon-Hemsley era, Chyna was thrust into the WWF Intercontinental and European Championship picture with Chris Jericho, Hardcore Holly, Kurt Angle, and Eddie Guerrero. I don't know whether her later Vivid video productions, if I would use the term thrust into but nevertheless. Though she sided with Latino Heat on television to give her something to do outside the ring, the real-life Joan Laurer had signed a deal with Playboy to appear naked in their popular magazine. Speaking on somebody, I won't mention any news sites that I'm not sure, but on someone's Documenting Chyna show, the star's former manager revealed that in order to stop her from doing the shoot, Vince McMahon offered the powerhouse the WWF Championship. And there's a quote here. They offered her the WWE Championship belt, but Vince said, but you can't do Playboy, because she got offered to do Playboy. She chose Playboy over the belt. She went and got her boobs done one week and didn't tell Vince, and when she came back, he was fucking pissed. According to Anzaldo, the Playboy shoot cost Chyna the honor of being the first female to hold the WWF Championship, and instead her storyline with Eddie Guerrero continued. The talent was gifted with gold prior to her departure a few years later, however, when she was given a run with the WWE Women's Championship.
That's not... I thought Vince wanted her to do Playboy. Didn't he have the deal with Playboy?
Well, besides that... fucking Sable made $1 million. They fucking worked and they tried to get Sonny to do it. And Sonny at that time, believe it or not, folks, 1996 or 7 or whatever it was, didn't want to do Playboy. So Sable, of course, said, hey, because she wanted to be on fucking billboards and milk cartons and everything she could get on. That fucking fame whore. So at any rate, it was the biggest selling Playboy of all time, and that led to the relationship with the WWF and Playboy, which was, what did he just give this date as? In 2000, for the previous 3 years, umpteen of the girls had been in Playboy. They had a big deal going on.
And it kept going, because I remember Christy Hemme was in there, and Ashley Massaro, and Tori Wilson, and various other women who were still involved.
Maybe Vince said, no, Chyna, don't do Playboy. Fuck, it'll kill the deal if they see what you've got going on. Maybe that was it.
Be nice. Be nice.
Oh, it's like, a guy broke into her apartment last week. She yelled, rape. He yelled, no. Don't get mad at me. Get mad at Rodney Dangerfield. But anyway, no, this is complete bullshit. he didn't offer her especially didn't offer her the belt to not do Playboy. He didn't offer her the belt if she would do Playboy. Maybe he was mad. Maybe was her deal outside of the WWF deal to do Playboy? Was she trying to?
Well, she did more
do
than
something on her own.
Did she do more than one, or was that Sable? One of them did Playboy on their own. They did once while they were with the company, and then once after they left the company.
Well, Sable did it more than once, so that may have been the one. But regardless, no, this is complete. Whoever old Anthony is, he's just, what the fuck? They were never going to put the belt on her. No. And more people try to fucking act like they were, and it would have been a great thing. Holy shit. Can you imagine a male or female who would have held the WWF championship that would have been a worse in-ring worker?
Well, a couple things here. First of all, she had already won the Intercontinental title from Jeff Jarrett before this. Second of all, I didn't recognize this name. You tell me, was this guy around at all? Was he Sable's manager in 2000?
Not Sable, but Chyna.
Or Chyna.
You got Sable on the mind.
Yeah.
I don't recognize the name. Is probably the manager that she got whenever she was doing whatever she was doing after wrestling, and that's what she told him.
Here are the people who held the WWE Championship, formerly the World Wrestling Federation Championship, in 2000. Triple H, The Rock, Triple H, The Rock, Kurt Angle, The Rock.
Yeah, I don't see, and Chyna. No.
You don't have to do the Riho voice.
Well, in that company, you would. Let's, in the year 2000, explain to me how anybody could logically see Chyna defeating any of the people whose names you just mentioned.
Now, I remember when she showed up with her breast implants because DX did a whole goofy interview based around her breast implants. Was Vince at all angry that you remember?
I don't know when she got them. I might have been gone by then and happy about it.
You were still there. I'm pretty sure you were still there because I think Michaels was still in DX when it happened.
Okay, well, in that case, then he's got his timeline all fucked up because I was gone in 99. If she got her tits done before that, then it was not in 2000 on the decline of DX and the rise of the McMahon-Helmsley era. This whole thing doesn't make any sense. If anybody out there has the exact date that Chyna showed up with larger upper frontal protuberances, go back to who was the WWF champion in 1998?
In 98, there were a lot of title changes. Oh, well, here we go.
Well, yeah, because that's when Shitstain was really firmly in control of the destiny of everybody. So I'm sure it changed every week.
Actually, not as many as I thought. 98. It goes crazy the next year. 98, Shawn Michaels, Steve Austin, Kane, Steve Austin. The title's vacated. And then The Rock, and then Mankind.
Okay, what about 99?
99, we begin
99?
We begin with Mankind, The Rock.
99?
Mankind, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Undertaker, Steve Austin, Mankind, Triple H, Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon, title vacated, Triple H, The Big Show, and Big Show holds it until January 3rd of 2000.
Well, yeah, there's a perfect chance for Chyna to slip in there. So this is completely hogwash. And Anthony was apparently her bag carrier during the latter part of her life and told him stuff, or he's just making stuff up to glorify her memory. But this is ridiculous. So I just saw that. It just flashed up on the Twitter machine. But go ahead. This is your show. The last thing I want to do is take over in any kind of way.
How high was Vince Honor, though, when you were still a part of things?
Oh, he was all wrapped up in that whole group. And honestly, until she started trying to wrestle, the idea of having the big girl bodyguard, muscle in the corner, whatever, and she looked the part, that wasn't horrible. And by the time they got her to wrestling guys, that way, even though she was huge, that was just ridiculous because her work wasn't really very good. But he liked the whole group and the whole thing, and it was a visual package. He likes visual packages. But then she, she, like all the rest of the people, it seems like that you put in that position, lost complete grip on reality and thought she should be the WWF champion. Like Sable thought she should be a giant movie star and major motion pictures and sitcoms. And that's when it always leads to shit. Well, of course, her with the thing with Stephanie and Triple H, that, led to things. But, you can tell that they want to desperately believe this publicity that is put out by them or about them. And when they do, it leads to ruin. Warrior, Sable, Chyna, these were manufactured personalities that couldn't get over on their own without a giant promotional machine behind them and the fact that they looked great, but they had no substance, so you had to hide that. When they started wanting to do things that required substance, then that exposed them. And also, when they started to... all three of those people at various points in time tried to sue Vince for multi-millions of dollars because they thought they should be the highest paid person in wrestling. And they were actually, as an aggregate group, three of the least talented people for whatever wrestling is supposed to be. I'm sure they had talents elsewhere. But as far as for what pro wrestling was supposed to be, I can't think of three people that were more successful in this business that had less to offer it.
Well, Jim, on that topic, we will return to Kevin Pierpont's question in a moment. This was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Adam Stringer in Houston, Texas. It is well known Jim is a huge fan of both the Ultimate Warrior and Sable.
What? Did you have that queued up and standing by?
It was one of the ones here, so I'm going to go to it now. Often comparing them to each other, the world wants to know, who is worse, Ultimate Warrior or Sable?
Well, I think Warrior was worse just because he was a repulsive human being as well that said horrible things about people and his right-wing crackpottedness and, things he said about Heenan or just people in general and his constant... I mean, I just recently went through a lot of the lawsuits that he and Vince had back and forth, the material there, because it's going to be... it's going to be talked about on television in the near future. Let's put it that way. And just this guy was stunningly full of himself. He demanded to be the highest paid guy or be paid as much as Hulk Hogan and catered to and blah, blah, blah. And he had the body and Vince's promotional machine behind him. He couldn't wrestle. He couldn't talk. He didn't know what the business was about. He didn't care to learn. I mean, say you expected Sable to be a flash in the pan from the start because look at her. She's 30-something years old, and she just now wants to get in wrestling because her husband, was talked into bringing her along to the contract meeting with Vince. She wanted to get on television, and you knew she wasn't going to be around very long because then she's going to age out of it, and she wasn't any good at anything involving the wrestling industry while she was in it. But people freaked out because a lot of people were watching the TV, and she had giant pneumatic tits that she would show off right to the borderline of what they'd show on USA Network because she just wanted to be on TV and get in movies. She forgot the part about you have to actually be able to do something once you get there. She couldn't sing, she couldn't dance, she couldn't act, she had no personality, she wasn't entertaining, and she adamantly refused to do almost anything physical, but wanted to be the women's champion. So help me. Whoo, jump back, gotta kiss myself. One time.
All right, our next question from Kevin Pierpont to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com.
How many Pierponts have we got going on?
We haven't asked this question yet.
Did we not ask this fucking guy's question?
No, you jumped in and said you had breaking news that some bootleg manager of Chyna who's passed away years ago is saying that she was the champion or going to be the champion in 2000.
All right. I'm aware of what I just talked about. I just didn't know what we just talked about.
Here's Kevin Pierpont's question. What was the best lineup of any of the four Horsemen?
Best depending on what measure. The original lineup was Ole Anderson, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, and Ric Flair with J.J. Dillon as their manager. And the reason why that was the lineup was just because that was the the top heels. And as we know, especially on Atlanta TV, the top heels used to get sent out in group interviews quite a bit. And Ole was the only one that didn't that fit as far as the personalities. They all went out together and they all fucking hung out together. Ole was not of that generation, and he was not a bar guy. But then when they got Luger, you know, let's face it, at that point, Lex in the ring was not as good as Ole as far as a performer, but looked better and was the blue chip guy. And probably they got most of the attention with that group because 86 was the hottest year. But then...
Well, no, Luger didn't join until the beginning of 87.
That's right.
Because remember, Ole, all of a sudden, Tully got mad because Ole took off to go see a snot-nosed kid.
Yeah, a snot-nosed kid, Bryant. But anyway, the point is, in that frame up, they were the first for about a year. It was Ole. They got, most of the attention because they were first. But then Luger come in, and he was more visually impressive, and they featured him quite a bit because they'd signed him to a contract, so they had to feature him. And the thought was, surrounding him with Ric Flair and Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson and J.J. Dillon, how can you not learn in the ring and physically and mentally and the whole 9 yards? And he did. He got better. But then when they got Wyndham, that would have been by far the best working variation of the team because that was four of the best workers in the entire business. But by that point, the Horsemen had kind of cooled off because it wasn't new and fresh anymore and business wasn't as strong. So there's points to be made for all, and let's face it, whatever they did and whoever they put in it once Turner Broadcasting took over doesn't count because it doesn't count because that wasn't real Horsemen.
Oh, like the lineup of Flair, Arn, Ole as kind of the manager, Woman kind of as the manager with Sid, and the return of Barry Windham.
No, we tried to reunite the Horsemen in. After TBS took over, and that was prevented by Jim Herd, and they never got it right after that. But that's what I would say. It depends on what you're looking for.
I feel bad for Paul Roma because he was actually pretty talented and pretty good in the ring, and because they made him a Horseman for no good reason.
Then everybody hated him.
Everyone hated
fuck
him.
You.
Yeah.
You fucking can't lick the Horseman's shoes. Have you ever licked a horseshoe, Brian?
I have not.
They don't taste very good.
You've licked a horseshoe?
I didn't say that.
Were you hanging out with the Scufflin' Hillbillies?
I was hanging out with Chuck Conley over in Ashland. Cousin Alfred never did show up, though.
All right. Well, let's get some
How about
more
Uncle
questions.
Daddy and Cousin Brother?
We've had several questions sent in, not as many as I thought there would be, which is telling, about some recent comments the Young Bucks have made about you. Both in print and apparently with their own mouths.
With their own mouths. They didn't use somebody else's mouths. They used their own mouths.
You never know with these two guys.
The audacity. The gall of them. The perspicacity even.
This first one was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Steve in Folkston, Georgia. You need to read this at the bottom to see the Bucks comment on Jim. And let me get this article. This is an article from Bleacher Report, who I believe Bleacher Report does the AEW pay-per-views. And there's a bunch of comments about their thoughts about various things.
I remember that. Well, it wasn't. What was the title of that book I read? It was Under the Bleachers by Seymour Butts.
I hate to ask this. Is that an actual book?
Yeah, it was on the bestseller list. It replaced Golden Rivers by I.P. Freely.
Okay. Because I know there's a porn star named Seymour Butts. He used to have a TV show on Showtime with him and his family.
I was not aware. So does Seymour Butts really know best?
That was not the name of the show. I forget the name of it now off the top of my head. It was like him and his family. Because he was like he had like his own porn studio. But I think like his mom worked for him and like all the people I would think like, oh my God, why would you want these people to be involved with this?
What the fuck? That's no fun at all. That's just no fun. All right. Anyway, answer little Chauncey Pierpont's question here. Ask it.
Here's the Young Bucks, their thoughts on Jim Cornette's criticism.
Okay.
I'll read the article and then I'll get to the quote. Anytime somebody achieves success in any sport or part of the entertainment business, they are going to receive a lot of criticism, especially on social media, where everyone has a voice. The Young Bucks' most vocal critic has been Jim Cornette. The legendary manager has forgotten more about wrestling than most people will ever know. But when it comes to the Bucks,
I resent that comment. I have not forgotten that much.
But when it comes to the Bucks, he never seems to have anything nice to say. We asked Nick and Matt about Cornette's comments and if there is any personal animosity on their end. Here's a quote from Nick. As of now, I think he is just doing it for the attention. He has a podcast he is trying to sell. And right now, it's hot to talk about AEW. He'll bury anything AEW does to get listeners. That's the only reason why he acts like he hates us. It's all work.
Oh, good Lord.
It's all work. He's trying to work an angle that's never going to happen because we aren't going to hire him. We saw him once at a show, and the first thing he says to us was, "Hey, Bucks, we've got the hottest angle right now on the internet." We just kind of rolled our eyes. He's stuck in the past, and the poor guy won't grow up.
Okay, well, first of all, I've told that story before, but here's the thing, and I'll tell it again here in a second, but I'm just wondering, I still don't know. Remember, like when we said when they supposedly put those guys over Private Party, but they put them over in such a way that it was a complete fluke? And I said, are they really just stupid and they did it that way, trying to do it the right way, or did they know? And they're just doing one of those Hulk Hogan fake jobs. And I've had people say, "Oh, they're with it. They knew what they were doing." But at the same point, they say these things. I understand that they have to deflect what I'm saying by coming up with, well, he's just saying that to get attention. I was getting attention before AEW started, I was getting attention before the Young Bucks started. I was getting attention before the Young Bucks, as my mama Cornette used to say, were a gleam in their father's eye. And I think they have to say this, well, he's just mad because we won't hire him, or what. What kind of audition have I been doing for AEW? Where is the point where this works out to where this is a plea to get a job, Brian? I've said everything I could possibly think about these people, and they deserved every bit of it. How would this be me trying to get them to hire me? I have actually come out and said the English words that I'm repulsed by their product. They all disgust me. They should be ashamed of themselves, and I wouldn't want to coexist and breathe the same oxygen with any of them for the offensive joke wrestling product they have put out. Does that sound like somebody trying to get a job?
Well, the funny thing to me is that, it says he's trying to work an angle because we're never going to hire him, but their boss wanted to hire you. I mean, that's the funniest part about this whole thing. Their boss, the guy who signs their checks, the guy who made them executive vice presidents, wanted to hire you.
I didn't take his money because I knew he wouldn't listen to anything I said because he was up these fucking guys' ass. So I don't waste my fucking time. I don't take money for shit unless that shit that I give them or whoever is then used. If they're not going to use the shit, I will not take money for the shit. And I don't want to have anything to do with this shit. But here, again, I'm wondering whether their sense of self-importance. We just talked about Sable and the Ultimate Warrior and the fucking other guy, or woman, Chyna, believe in their own publicity. These two smarmy little fucks actually, I think they're as good as they think they are. They believe it. And because they've had this little small niche audience that they travel around like a Grateful Dead fucking show, pump them up for the past few years. So they think that everybody wants to work with them. And I've told the story and I'll tell it again. One of the Global Force Wrestling shows that Jeff Jarrett was running about 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know if it was Bowling Green, Kentucky or Jackson, Tennessee. But he had me come and be the wrestling legend to do the deal with the radio DJ and blah, blah, blah. And the Bucks were on one of the shows. And I walk in the locker room. It's in the minor league ballpark. And I'm there early, obviously, because I always am. But then the boys start trickling in. I've been outside talking to people that I know. I walk back in, and I see, and there's this exciting locker room of modern wrestling stars. About 12 guys either laying on the couches or sitting on the floor with their heads on their bags, every single one of them staring at their fucking phones. Not a goddamn word being exchanged by anybody. And I later found out, and I mentioned this just blew my mind, that one of the people in the room was texting with a guy on the other side of the fucking room. And I told this story several times where I mentioned, because in the old days, before you had all this bullshit so you could sit there and just noodle, you had to be entertaining. You were in the locker room with Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson and the Road Warriors and blah, blah, blah. You need to be entertaining. If you were going to speak and not be told to shut up, you better be able to tell a fucking story. What was everybody doing last night? Let's talk about some fucking spots. Let's talk about some wrestling stories. Who's still going to talk about some pussy? They're noodling on their phones. So it's a giant minor league baseball locker room. So as I'm walking through it, there's the Bucks, and I've already blistered them on the internet. I believe this was not long after they super kicked the 9-year-old kid for his birthday, and that made video around the world, and I explained how fucking fake and stupid that was. But since Jeff has invited me to be there, and I am the highest paid individual on the roster for the work that I'm going to be doing that night, I didn't want to be a complete prick. So as I walk through I see him sitting there on the couch. I said, "Hey, Bucks, so we got the only angle in wrestling if people believe," and walked on through to the other side. Being a smart ass, I didn't need to say because it's true. I figured they'd get the picture. And that's the last words that I've exchanged with them. If that's been, when was GWF's Global Force Wrestling's baseball stadium tour? Was that 2016?
It was
that's
a while
the last
ago.
Whatever it was. That's the last words I've exchanged with them since then, in person or via any electronic means. And they have been telling the story since then, and I'm begging to work an angle with them. Son, let me tell you something, both of you sons, I don't work with minor leaguers, and that's what you still are to me. So if I don't know how I can articulate my disgust of your existence any better. But if it makes you feel any better, no, I don't want your job. Doing just fine over here, not embarrassing myself every week on national television like you and the rest of the Tony Khan Amateur Hour. So fuck off.
And again, you know, and this is Nick Buck, the younger Buck, not necessarily
the younger Buck,
not known as being the brightest of guys in real life. And you don't know how much of this is what he really believes and how much of it is something he's convinced himself, but...
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know whether they really believe it because they're so fucking far up their own asses and they love the smell of their own farts, or whether it's they're saying this as a defense mechanism because, well, that's the only reason that he says that bad stuff about us. He doesn't really mean us. He just wants attention, and he's mad that we won't give him a job.
Your boss wanted to hire him. And you know what? If Jim had said yes, you guys would have sucked it up and tried to make money with it, because it's all about money with those guys.
But it ain't with me, because I don't need to fucking aggravate.
But that's every time they ever say, oh, Jim just wants to work here. Jim had the chance. Jim is where he is by choice. Your boss wanted Jim on that team. It's one of those early phone calls. He wanted Jim on the team. Jim's doing a podcast instead. So,
because right now I'm doing this podcast from my house instead of a bad wrestling program with a bunch of outlaw mud show talent from one of the most COVID-ridden states in the fucking union. So,
can you imagine if you went to work there? Let's just say you somehow decided to do it. You'd be losing your mind right now, because how could you not say anything bad about how badly booked the shows are?
Well, no, if I had gone to work there, I would have lost my mind for about the first fucking 6 weeks, and then we wouldn't be talking about it right now. The legless guy in the Battle Royal would have been the finish of it. The idea of putting pockets on television would have been the finish of it. I would have had to have said, look, let's settle it right now. The guy with his hands in his pockets or me. The little midget fucking trailer park trash dwarf or me. The fucking legless people or me. And if it's me, then I can, as I mentioned to Bruce that time, I said, I'm fixing to re-up my lease on my house up here in Connecticut. Is it a fucking deal breaker that I don't go to the Middle East because I need to make arrangements for a moving truck to go back to Tennessee. He said, no, it's not a deal breaker. There are certain red lines that I do not cross.
And again, another important thing to point out is, because they're always making it sound like you want to work with them so badly, they're the guys who went out there, shirt after shirt, killing the business, spot monkey. I'm basically saying what Jim Cornette said about us, we're going to put it on shirts and try to make money with it. They've been trying to ride the Cornette train a lot more than you've been trying to ride theirs.
I titled their book.
Yeah.
Because they can't get over it. But here's the thing. It goes back to, and they still try to tell the story and make me a heel with, well, he screwed us around in Ring of Honor and wouldn't use us after we gave notice to come there. Would he blah, blah, blah. I've told that story a million times because it's true. I knew that the Ring of Honor audience liked those guys. And Hunter Johnston set up a phone call. They were under contract to TNA. And this was when Sinclair had bought the company. I said, guys, I know you're popular with the audience. We're setting this up. We're trying to get the TV. We're going to be running house shows later on in the year. How long you got on your contracts? It was 6 months or some equivalent period of time close to that. Well, okay, well, we're interested when your guys' contracts are up. We're interested in fucking dealing with you. Keep track of it. Let us know. We can't talk to you right now anyway, right? One of those type of deals. But blah, 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 right? It was one of many phone calls that we were making to people, either that we could sign then or that we wanted to know that we were at least somewhat interested. Fucking 2 weeks later, they called, well, we gave our notice and quit. We can start any time. What? What the fuck? What part of we're interested in talking to you when your contracts are up did you not understand?
Well, let me jump in here.
Wait a minute. At the time, we had the Briscoe brothers, Mark and Jay Briscoe. We had, but we're losing, and I was broke up about that, Chris Hero and Claudio Castagnoli. We had Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin. We had, although they were working as many singles as tags, we had the American Wolves, Eddie Edwards and Davey Richards. And for a kind of a team that you could work with as a utility team, because we're pushing all those other guys as main event teams, Kenny King and Rhett Titus. Where the fuck do these two fucking grade school kids fit in that? Originally, I said, okay, Hunter, these guys, little baby face, spot team, we can use them. But there was no main event thought that they were going to have long runs with the Ring of Honor World Tag Team title to begin with. And then they show up and now they're the fucking team who came to dinner. Well, now we feel bad. So we try to book them. But then Greg, the office boy, don't want to fly these two numbnutses from California. And I don't blame him. And because they had to come in on what Kerry Silken was paying them the last time that they were there, $500 a piece. So all of a sudden, you've got $500, a $1,000 payoff, plus 2 plane tickets from California. Figure that to be $700-800, plus a hotel room in these two, just to put them on a TV taping. Fucking hell. So we tried to book them when we could, but they didn't want us to, the Sinclair office, because it was too fucking expensive. They sure didn't want to take any less money. And I wasn't that fucking fond of them to begin with. Do you know they came to my fucking, wait a minute, hold on, what year was that? My 50th birthday party.
Really?
Because I was stuck. Ring of Honor had a show in New York on my birthday in 2011. And as a matter of fact, I think we got together on that trip while I was up there. But Kerry Silken wanted to take me and Stacy to a great burger place in New York City. Okay. In the night before the show. And so we went, and he brought the Bucks with him because he always would bring, and a couple of the other boys. I can't remember who was there. God damn it. But he would always take some of the guys out and feed them dinner and take them around and show them New York City, whatever. I didn't have anything against them at the time. They hadn't super kicked any children on fucking video or had any phony matches with the Invisible Man yet that I was aware of. So I had nothing against them, but we're obviously different people. So they sat down at one end talking to somebody else, and me and Stacy and Carrie sat up at the other end, and we had burgers in New York. But these guys, they're just fucking full of themselves. And I'm sorry, just because this fucking small little niche audience that they have fostered for themselves thinks that this shit's funny in some kind of way doesn't mean that I have to fucking kowtow to them or say, oh, well, I guess times have changed and shit tastes good now, to feed their fucking ego. Whatever they're doing, it's not wrestling, but whatever they're doing, they might be good at it. But I'm critiquing people on wrestling, and they ain't good at it.
All right, well, we also have a quote from Matt Buck.
Oh, there's more.
With Jim.
You wound me up on purpose.
I didn't know you were going to go this far.
Well, I'll be glad to go further. Tell me what Pieface had to say.
Because you stomped on a few of the follow-ups, but hold on. With Jim, it's a sensitive topic because as soon as you say something, he is going to create a thread about it, and it just gives him more content.
Create a thread? But what does that mean?
I guess doing what we're doing here.
Is this a thread?
Not in the traditional sense.
Okay.
But again, not the brightest guys. Matt and Jackson. Brilliant manipulators, but not exactly Einstein. He's a shock jock. And he has to say things because it gives him listeners. People don't listen to his podcast to hear him say good things about people. They want to hear him rant because that's his gimmick. If he is making money doing it, then great. Good for him. It's hard to make money in the pro wrestling business. If there's an audience for him, then great.
Actually, I've not really had a lot of problem for the past 40 years in that one particular thing. Go ahead.
There's an audience that loves what we do too. If that's the way he wants to do it and that's the way he wants his legacy remembered, that's up to him. End quote.
Oh, well.
You shock jock. You shock jock.
I'm just a shock jock. They think I do this on purpose. We were talking about this here not long ago. Other people actually do this on purpose, and it doesn't work because people can tell because they're just doing shit. I've been doing the same thing since 15,000 people were listening to this podcast. I haven't changed any of my stories because they're all true. I don't need to alter them. And I haven't changed any of my opinions because I still believe in them. It's not like I was just saying this shit specifically to get people to listen to me. Brian, as you'll recall, I was just doing this for shits and giggles for quite a while until I changed my co-host and started making a little money with it. But I didn't do this on purpose, and this is not something you can do on purpose. Because we've said before, I think the reason why so many people have started listening to our shows is because this is the only place where they don't hear bullshit, where somebody is bullshitting, whether it be knocking somebody and you can tell they don't really mean it, they're just trying to be controversial, or whether they're just too fucking wrapped up in whether they want to get hired, have another run, get a job or whatever, so they won't say boo to a goose, much less anything detrimental about anybody, whether they deserve it or not. And then you've got the people that are just pretty goddamn non-entertaining, that try to keep people's attention for extended periods of time on the podcast. Every once in a while, we fall into that category, but most of the time, we're saying something worthwhile. But we're not manufacturing anything here. It's just they can't take it because I have an opinion, and I think their wrestling sucks, and I don't need them. That's what they're just fucking, their brains explode about. Am I the only person that used to be in the wrestling business that does not give a fuck whether I ever do it again because I'm embarrassed at the state of it? And that I'm not waiting by the phone to ring for people, oh, we want to bring you in. I still get messages from that used to be a term in the business. We want to bring you in, like in the territory days, want to bring you into Memphis, want to bring you into Mid-South, want to bring you into wherever, right? And so these fucking local yokel goddamn outlaw promoters these days that run their hometown on their birthdays have heard that terminology from the legends that they brought in. Want to bring you in. And so I get messages on my phone from people that I have never heard of before that say, hey, Jim, I'm doing such and such and so, and we want to bring you in. I do not want to be brought. I had already decided that I was not doing anything live this year before COVID. COVID just unfortunately knocked me out of a few restaurant visits this year, but I wasn't going on the road to begin with.
Are you saying that you didn't secretly dream of managing a team against the Young Bucks, similar to, Tully Blanchard's been a manager against the Young Bucks, and then eventually taking the super kick, maybe having them do a high spot or two against you? At 60 years old, you didn't dream of this?
No. Well, if I did, I would wake up and immediately take an antacid. At one point with FTR, and we've talked about this too, with FTR, I said, you know what? Those guys, they get it. They're so good. I could manage them somewhere a time or two, or for some specific big event or item somewhere, not on an ongoing basis. That was open until I saw what was the show that had the legless boy in the Battle Royal. As soon as I saw that Battle Royal, I said, well, I think that'll never happen in this company. And, it was not to work against the Bucks. It was I'd probably like, and if we do ever go back to live events again, and I do ever go back to a live event again, maybe at WrestleCade. They have a big budget, nice crowds. Maybe sometime I'll manage FTR, but it wasn't in no way, shape, or form to work with the Bucks, but rather to, if I could, help FTR. But good God Almighty, I've been pile driven by Jerry Lawler, figure four'd by Ric Flair, bionic elbowed by Dusty Rhodes, tombstoned by The Undertaker. I have wrestled superstar Billy Graham. The fucking a crowning achievement of my career to work with the Young Bucks. Fuck you. Give me a break.
And you still have more hair on your head than Nick Jackson.
I still do.
Well, one other quote from this interview, because I thought you'd get a kick out of it. Apparently, Matt Jackson, the one who looks like Marty Gorman, while describing AEW, says he likes to describe it as Cirque du Soleil on steroids.
Well, okay, now we found some common ground.
I thought so.
I will agree with that statement. That's perfect. It shows the mental disconnect with where they are versus where I am, that they would think that that's a positive thing to say. It's something I could have said, and they'd get mad about it. But actually, you know what? Besides Brian Cage, point me to the fucking Cirque du Soleil member they've got that's on the steroids. Because they ain't working. They ain't getting the good shit. Because I've got goddamn fucking knots on my ass bigger than some of their biceps.
And once again, obviously, they have their YouTube show where they like to do their comedy. There's a reason why Republican comedy shows have never really worked out well. But again, if you guys want to do a really funny skit, sit your biggest fans down and explain your views on abortion and Black Lives Matter and Barack Obama. Just sit your biggest fans down and talk to them about what you guys believe. Yes, they should.
Yeah, they should go in depth on all that stuff that they secretly hold from people because they're lunatics.
Well, Jim, they may be lunatics. They may look ridiculous acting like little tough guys, but they are executives, executive vice presidents because, well, Triple H is going to do it. I guess we want to do it too. But maybe they need to start dressing like executives, and they're from Southern California. I could understand not feeling comfortable wearing a suit. If only there was a clothing company that made professional shirts that were as comfortable as a t-shirt.
Well, I'll tell you what, there sure is. And we've talked about them before. We'd like to welcome them back to the program, the folks at Buttercloth. Because, yeah, that's the thing with the Young Bucks. They are the guys from California, Southern California, so they want to be kind of hip and stylish and maybe casual at the same time. Well, instead of just wearing crappy old T-shirts or pink Minnie Mouse shirts like your friend Miro, the folks at Buttercloth make professional-looking, button-down, collared shirts that are as comfortable as your favorite T-shirt and as warm and soft as a puppy's belly. And not only that, Brian, but I'll have you know, I have another email here from another cult member. Enrique wrote this to me just 1 month ago, and I've actually just seen it here recently. Hello, Jim. After listening to the Experience episode 351, I placed an order for a Buttercloth Henley shirt. I tried every promo code mentioned on the podcast and even entered buttercloth.com/JCE. No discount was applied. I emailed Buttercloth. Within 12 minutes, they replied. They were prompt to troubleshoot the issue. They gave old Enrique a personal promo code. He was able to place his order. And he says, feel free to mention this on the podcast to let the cult know that Buttercloth has excellent customer service and they're very pleasant to do business with. Best wishes from Kansas City and love the shirt. Folks, whether you're husky, whether you're tall, whether you're portly, whether you're short, they've got something that can fit anybody. And as they say, you'll look like a Friday night but feel like a Sunday morning. They're not stiff and scratchy. They're soft. It's a revolutionary new fabric, 100% long fiber cotton. It has a 6-way stretch that's breathable. It keeps you warm in the winter, cool in the summer. And you can go to their website and you search through they have something to fit everybody. They'll ask you a few questions about what your shape you're in. But anyway, whether you can't go to the mall these days, even in the states that's permitted, it's not a thing that you should do for your health. You can order this online. It's a beautiful gift box because they have a special gifting program. And during the gifting program time, they can ship to multiple addresses in one order and put personalized notes in for each. So it's a one-stop shopping deal. Anyway, for a limited time, folks, Buttercloth offering our listeners up to 50% off your first purchase. They've gone crazy. How do they stay in business? I don't know. Go to buttercloth.com. That's butter. You know how to spell that. You better spell butter. Cloth. CLOTH.com/JCE. The discount will be applied at checkout. Buttercloth.com/JCE to get up to 50% off of your purchase. And as we know also, if for some reason that doesn't work, they got excellent customer service. Just make yourself look slicker than come on a gold tooth with a Buttercloth shirt this holiday season.
Well, Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Danny Byers. I may have to change some of the words in this one. This is a question about Ric Flair's claim of 10,000 successful sexual conquests, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, boy, I tell you what, I remember that girl, and she always looked tired.
At age 71, no way in hell Ric Flair is still pulling that kind of... I'm not going to say that. I call bullshit.
Well, no, he didn't say he was still doing it. He's happily married now to wonderful Whitney. Well, no,
it says here he made the claim before the age of 68. So let's give him 50 years to hit that 10,000 mark. And remember, he claims, this is really poorly written. It would be 3.8 different women per week from age 18 to 68 to simply hit 10,000.
Nah, I don't believe that. Well, for one thing, 3.8 women a week for most of that time for Flair would have been a low estimate. And do the math. Do you have a calculator in front of you?
I got one in my drawer here, yes.
Okay, there's 365 days in a year, right?
Yes, there are.
Okay, let's say there were some long trips. He was riding with other people. He just didn't have time. So let's say he was only with 300 women per year.
Let's be honest about things. Are you being liberal with the amount of women that you're assigning to him?
Well, but see, if you break it down into minutia.
Did he have a different woman in every town?
Well, yes, but see, that's what I'm saying. If you're breaking it down into the minutia of things, in several towns, everybody had a regular in several towns, where even if there was an opportunity to do something else, you wouldn't because she was your favorite. So if he goes to Baltimore 12 times a year, but he's only with one woman, then he only gets credit for one instead of 12. So there may be some situations there where it may be an exaggeration to say there were 10,000 different ones. But I find it hard to believe that I was doing better than Flair.
What are you saying?
And what I'm saying is that I guess, everybody that would have a problem with this is probably not going to have a problem with it anymore. I would have 3 or 4 experiences a week either at the matches or after the matches on a regular, as a general rule. But not all of those were all different people every time, because as you mentioned, you had your specific person in Birmingham or in Chicago or whatever the case may be. And occasionally in some of the big cities, you had a couple of different ones.
This may be why the Young Bucks don't like you. You're a sinner.
And if they didn't get along, if your couple of special ones didn't get along, then you had to see them separately. So the point is, when we're trying to figure out how to figure this up, but let's say 300 times a year, in 10 years, he gets to 3,000. I'm telling you, he moved to the Carolinas in 1974. And over the next 10 years, I would think 3,000 different women might be a little low.
Well, now hold on. Let me stop you right there. Because I'm going to assume, based on his station in life, that he wasn't as successful in Minnesota before he came to the Carolinas, and that perhaps he wasn't instantly successful when he arrived as Rip Hawk's tag team partner.
Actually, you would be mistaken there, young man, because Stan Lane actually took a fucking cut in. I've said many times that when I got into business, I took a cut in pay between what I was doing as a photographer and what I was doing when I became a rookie manager. Stan Lane took a cut in pussy when he got into business because he didn't have as much time. He was working doing room service calls at the fucking Hilton in Myrtle Beach and going to the fucking clubs every night till 6 o'clock in the morning. When he actually had to start wrestling and going to towns, it cut down on his pussy.
With all due respect, let's not compare Stan Lane with Ric Flair before he became the Nature Boy.
Flair was still a fucking personality. But anyway, nevertheless, so okay, he's in fucking Charlotte when he's 23. For the next 20 years at least, I think he could have got 2/3 of the way to 10,000 just in the next 20 years. He'd been in his mid-40s.
Based on what you're saying, you think he could have gotten to 6,000 within his first 20 years in the Carolinas?
Well, but the only thing I'm saying is that were all those different, because I know he had some standbys, but
how many two-a-days do you think he worked?
There were a number of those. There were often two-a-nights because especially if you got to a town early enough, you get to the town, you go in, you make sure they know you're there, you see what match you're on, see what you're working, then you go back out of the parking lot. Then you come back in, but if you're on late, by intermission time, you're probably going back out of the parking lot again. Or if you're staying in that town, because that's the only time you really wasted everything in the parking lot was if you were driving back home and you did not have a hotel room. If you're staying in that town, then you've made other arrangements, or you may have done something at the building and then booked something else for the hotel room afterwards. But it was quite easy to have two-a-days or two at a times.
Because that changes things. Because if you're saying and he goes to Baltimore and there's someone in the morning and someone at night, maybe someone at the arena, that's 3 people all of a sudden.
Well, here's the thing also, as George Carlin once said, I never fucked a 10, but one night I fucked 5 2s. There could be a situation where if you're counting, if you're doing the statistics on this, everybody that's involved in the experience, regardless of whether or what happened between you, everybody that's involved in the experience may count, in which case I had like a fucking 13-person week one time, but that was because of the 4 at one time. So you never know about these things.
Hold on, I'm pulling up something right now.
You're pulling on something. What are you doing?
I'm pulling up something right now.
Well, it usually goes up.
Will you get your mind out of the gutter?
Must come down.
In Wilt Chamberlain's 1991 book, A View from Above, he claimed to have slept with 20,000 different women during his life.
See, now that's stretching it.
There's this article from mentalfloss.com, that's some math here. By the way, I took out my calculator, I haven't used it once. If Wilt started out at the age of 15, from then up until the age of 55 when the book was published, he would have had 40 years to sleep with 20,000 women or 500 different women a year. Works out to roughly 1.4 women a day. So Ric Flair, if he's claiming 10,000 in how many years?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if we determined
when he made
that.
the claim.
He was 68 when he made but that's in his lifetime.
So now let's give him 50 years, 18 to 68.
Okay.
All right. So How the hell am I doing this? 10,000.
Well, 10,000 divided by 50, that would be only
200.
200 women per year. But as, of course, in the 60s, I'm sure things slowed down a little bit, but the 30s more than made up for that. That's doable.
Here's the other thing. What are the chances Ric Flair, who is known to drink, actually kept track of any numbers? He's not known for his ability to manage numbers well.
He's just doing a broad extrapolation. Well, I guess I shouldn't say a broad extrapolation. He's doing a general ballpark estimate of, I'm sure he didn't write it down or, keep any significant records. I wish I'd have done that just to answer some of these trivia questions. That's one thing I didn't keep records of. Well, under the most part.
So what you're saying is you think it's possible that he has had sexual relations 10,000 times, but you don't necessarily believe 10,000 different women.
Yeah, well, and once again, 10,000 is not really far-fetched when you go over a long career and you break it down like that. But as I said, the only thing that could affect that where I wouldn't believe it was if he was with the same person in a number of these markets over and over again, they wouldn't count as a different person, but he might have glossed over that. But, you'd have to really sit down and probably hire a private investigator and sit down and do some serious math on this thing.
Was Flair competitive? If someone else was doing well with the women in the territory, would Flair try to up his game?
Well, I was not physically standing there watching everything that he did or that everyone did because I was overdoing my own thing. But I think Rick was a very giving and generous person, and I'm sure he shared on many occasions and didn't begrudge other people the opportunity to graze in the same field. Wasn't a fence builder.
All right. I guess we've tackled that question every possible way we could.
Put it in every single position imaginable.
Let's get to our next question. This was sent in on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Wrestling Memes. Corny, if Bruno Sammartino would have come back to be Hulk Hogan's tag team partner at WrestleMania 1, would that have been bigger than Mr. T as far as the number of closed circuit ticket sales? Who else could have been used as Hulk's partner?
Well, God, and that would have been could you imagine trying to talk Bruno into that whole situation? I don't think it would have added to the closed circuit except maybe in the Northeast because Bruno was still a bigger name in the Northeast than Hulk Hogan was by far at that point in time.
Yeah.
But for the rest of the country, the gimmick of seeing a TV star that they believed was, and a movie star that they believed was also a tough guy was probably more important for the box office. And they'd never seen him wrestle. If they'd seen him, because remember, they got by with that match, but then the next year, the boxing match with Piper was abysmal. And did he do anything after that?
He came back in '87 and did some guest referee stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, he didn't wrestle. And the point is, the tease of seeing the big TV and movie star that was marketed as a badass, even though it was all, promotion, was more important to the national gate than any big wrestling star would have been to the national gate at that time because it was still the territory days. And I don't know any one person they could have got that would have been big in every single market in every single area of the country as much as the intrigue of seeing, Mr. T that we've never seen wrestle before wrestle. And of course, after they saw him wrestle, there was not much clamor to see it again. But the first time around, no, that was, I can see what they were going for, and it worked, obviously. But having Bruno on the card, because remember, people forget that WrestleMania 1 was a success, and people still remember, and it started a tradition, etc. But it was an overall success, but not every market, and a lot of the markets got canceled beforehand. They didn't even that had booked for the closed circuit. They didn't air them, and not all the ones that they did air did well. Bruno's name on the card in some fashion probably would have added, money to the gates of the Northeastern, Boston, Philadelphia, New York.
He was on the
Pittsburgh.
card in some fashion.
Was he on WrestleMania 1?
Yeah, because originally I believe the match was going to be, I want to say Brutus Beefcake versus Hillbilly Jim, and then Hillbilly Jim broke his leg. So it became Hillbilly Jim, so it became Brutus Beefcake with Johnny Valiant against David Sammartino with Bruno.
Oh, okay.
So you got Bruno at ringside, and then eventually, and he got one of the biggest pops of the night just for being a ringside, and then eventually he got physical towards the end of the match.
Yeah, but he wasn't advertised to wrestle.
No, he was advertised to be Unfortunately, this isn't a slight to David Sammartino, but David Sammartino with Bruno as his manager, everyone wanted to see Bruno Sammartino in that building. But like you said, Bruno didn't have the national presence. That was what Mr. T gave you. He gave you the crossover appeal and nationwide appeal, more than Bruno Sammartino would have. Bruno Sammartino would have maybe boosted the closed circuits in Boston, Philadelphia, and, the New York tri-state area, but it wouldn't have meant as much in Los Angeles.
So there you have it.
Our next question from Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru is from Mark in Dryden. I'm hoping things turn around for Dwayne Gill after his recent heart attack. Curious if Jim...
Oh my God, I didn't know about this.
Curious if Jim has any good stories about him, and of course, what did he think of the Gillberg character?
I always liked Dwayne. Dwayne Gill did jobs and TV work for the WWF going back, to the 80s, right? I met him in the 90s when I started there, and the Heavenly Bodies worked with him, and everybody that I managed at one point or another worked with Dwayne. And, then finally they came up with the whole Gillberg thing because it was ribbing the other company. And he'd come out they shaved his head, and he'd come out with the sparklers, and his physique was, how shall we say, not cosmetically pleasing. And he had fun with it. He did good. And, here's the thing. He's a nice guy that was dedicated to the wrestling business and got to get a little run. It was not a serious deal, but at the same time, it was not serious back then, but it was still wrestling. He didn't have matches with invisible people, or he wasn't winking at the opponents and saying, oh, we're going to perform this thing together. At least he played it straight as you could play it. So, I like Dwayne as a person, and I was glad he got the gimmick and got a chance to do something with that, and people still remember it. And I hadn't heard that he was in bad health, so I hope he's all right.
One of the interesting things about Gillberg was it was a rare example of the WWE indirectly acknowledging the competition to that degree.
Yeah. And well, that's the thing that kind of caught, people's attention, because it was, oh shit, we know who they're talking about, because they never referred to competition before. And when they did refer to other promotions, it was specific that they weren't competition. Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Well, I didn't want to be competition. The NWA, we worked that deal, but they wouldn't refer to directly, except for, during that time period, the Billionaire Ted skits, and then the Gillberg thing to take the piss out of Goldberg, as they say.
Our next question, Jim, also on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru, is from Nostalgic Dave Dynasty.
Hello, Dave Dynasty, and my best wishes to Monica.
I was listening to an old drive-thru, and you mentioned a show and meet and greet fiasco in Indianapolis around 2004.
Oh, good God.
I've never heard this story, and being a Hoosier by birth, I'm intrigued.
Oh my God. I wish I'd have known about this question ahead of time, because I would have sat down and made notes, because it's been over 15 years, but this fiasco. But this guy, some guy, was going to do a fan fest and wrestling event in Indianapolis. And I think it was either late 2004, maybe 2005, because the Midnight Express had just started doing the reunions. And he wanted me and the Midnight Express, and he had booked a lot of guys. Cactus Jack was there. Mick was there. I can't remember who all was, but a number of names were not only on the Fan Fest all day, but on the card. Well, Indianapolis is 100 miles up the road from Louisville. And so since I was trying to help the guy, because he seemed genuine on the phone, and I said, all right, as besides booking the midnight and myself, at the time I was with OVW here, I said, are you going to buy television commercials? How are you doing your advertising? We can make you a commercial. I can cut you a promo, send it to you, whatever. Oh, yeah, great. As a matter of fact, he ended up buying like $500 worth of commercials on the OVW TV show because a few of the OVW guys, the Midnight Express, we're in Louisville. We're on TV, so we're going to promote this show up the road. And so then I got Danny Davis involved where we cut we made a commercial spot and aired it for a month on the program, I think twice a week, whatever the fuck. And so anyway, this whole big deal. And with the hotel, he's got us at the hotel at X hotel place. And here's the reservation confirmation, the whole 9 yards. So we all get up there and we go to the building the day of and start doing the fan fest in this pretty big building. Can't remember what the name of it was, but it was a building. You could seat a couple thousand people in this thing, and everybody's got a table. And the fan fest, there wasn't 150 people come through this fan fest between like 11 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon. And so at least me and the Midnight had plenty of time to catch up and visit, right? But now they're going to do a show. And as I said, Mick Foley's there and these other names. And so Dennis was the one that said, let's go get our money, because as a matter of fact, he had sent some type of deposit also, right? So I went and talked to the guy, and that's when we heard they were having issues. Apparently, we found out this guy's young, and he didn't have any money. He thought that everybody was just going to come and buy a ticket, and as sometimes this happens, he shows up with no money except what's going to come in at the door to pay everybody, besides the deposits that have been sent out. Well, the Midnight Express and I are missing half our money, plus the money that my business partner, Danny Davis, has been promised from this guy for doing a TV commercial and running a schedule. And I go there, I'm like, whatever his name was, I can't remember now. I'm like, what the fuck, dude, right? Seriously. You put us all through this, and you weren't prepared for this? Well, my mom and dad, his mother and father were coming, and they were going to bring some money, and he's gone. And then we heard he's gone to the ATM, and apparently they cleaned every bit of money they could get out of the ATM, and his father and mother showed up, and they brought some money. And so anyway, we're sitting in the locker room, and they said, well, the guy and his parents are closed up in the ticket office. And he's sending stooges back and forth to ask. So they come in and ask, well, will you take this? If he gives you X amount of dollars. And of course, Cactus is already, hey, let's give the people a show. Because like 3 or 4 people showed up for the show that night. And anyway, I'm leaving some details out on the back and forth. But basically, the guy's emissary comes over to the locker room. And he says, will you guys work the Midnight Express? Will you guys work the show and do whatever we were going to do? If he gives you X dollars now and promises that he'll send X dollars afterwards. All right, we're here. So the guy comes back over with a check from either the guy's mother or father for the amount we agreed to, minus the 2 nights, the previous night and that night in the hotel. They took our hotel money. I said, what the fuck? Well, that's to pay for the hotel. I said, we didn't ask to come up here. We didn't ask to stay in that hotel. We're not on a goddamn a fucking vacation here, and we're staying there for fucking fun. It's not Caesar's Palace. And that's when I got hot, because now the Midnight's come up here on my say-so. Fucking Danny Davis has done this shit on my say-so. I went out in the building. I went to the fucking box office. They opened the door. I said, you motherfucker. I said, you call us. You ask us to come here. You make promises. You get me to stick my fucking neck out. You string us along all day. You get us to agree to some other deal, and now you're going to take our hotel money out of the deal that we made to save your ass? Fuck you. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to pay the Midnight Express what they're owed so they're whole, and we're going to leave right now. And then you, motherfucker, are going to send me a check for the money that you owe me and my business partner at my house, at my address that I've given you, or I'm going to find you. I'm going to fucking burn your house down. I'm going to kill your dog, and your parents there are going to be working for me for the rest of your fucking life. And then on the way out, I said, ladies and gentlemen, we are now leaving. You ain't going to see what you paid to see here tonight because the promoter is a pussy. His mommy and daddy are now trying to bail him out. He didn't know what he was doing. And we are leaving, more will follow, and you're all getting fucked. So ask for your money back. And then as people began to riot, Dennis smiled at me and said, Corny, it's just like the old days in Louisiana. And we left as some people were coming yelling at us, going to fight us. Some people were storming the box office to get their money back. Some people were up in arms just over the whole fucking, gall of the whole thing. And we got in the car and went back to the fucking hotel and had a nice dinner. I paid the boys. And then later on, sure enough, a check arrived in my fucking mailbox. And that's the last I ever heard of that fucking guy.
All right. Hope that answered the question.
I can't believe I talk to people regularly that were there when I've done comic conventions and since then. I can't believe Dave Dynasty didn't hear about that. It was a... And Mick talked everybody into going ahead and working to give the people a show.
My favorite fiasco convention story is still the one at the Cow Palace, which was a nightmare, but...
Oh, yes, I was offered to be booked on that, and I graciously declined, not only because I wasn't going to fly all the way across the country, but also because I heard who else was booked on it already, and I said, okay, this is going to be a goddamn disaster.
Well, my favorite part of the whole thing was there was a line I read, I think it may have been in Brian Alvarez's Figure 4 Weekly at the time, that while all this craziness was going on and the wrestlers were in an uproar, the line was, Steve Austin showed up and was debriefed by Mike Lano. And then for a time, Mike Lano was banned from the Cow Palace because of his involvement in, I guess, rallying the wrestlers up or whatever happened there.
Didn't one of the MMA guys, because there was MMA guys as well as pro wrestlers, didn't them pull a gun on somebody else in the fucking elevator and everybody was trying to find a promoter to get their money?
There was something that happened in the hotel. I don't remember.
And he'd booked the Midnight Express, Bobby and Dennis also. And then Dennis called me and said, hey, Corny, going to do this big deal. Everybody's going to be there. I said, I don't think you better do that either. And then come to find out later on, they'd never got a plane ticket, so they didn't get involved in that. But a bunch of people actually got tickets and went there expecting to be paid. And why, when you heard the lineup, the building, and the fact that nobody had ever heard of the fucking promoter before, why you would have gone, I have no idea. Wishful thinking, smoking the hopium, as they say. You know what, Brian? If one of these outlaw mud show promoters sells you a ticket to see people, and then those people that you bought a ticket to see are not there, that's actionable. If only we knew a good lawyer, if only we knew somebody who had a legal license and all the expertise in the world and could hold big major corporations to account for the way that they damage people or take advantage of people or frivolously play with people's rights and emotions. If only we knew a man like that.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. He'll sue the rest.
Yes, folks, whether you were taken advantage of the old bait and switch by a mud show wrestling promoter, or whether you have been victimized by one of the major corporations, for example, 3M, the defective earplugs that were given to our service people that caused hearing damage. Stephen P. New of newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084, is filing those cases within the next few months. The class action suit there, the opioids, and the opioid addiction situation that was caused by these major pharmaceutical companies. Those suits are being filed very shortly. We found out about the nursing homes. Some of the nursing homes, the old folks' homes, the rest homes, as they used to call them. People who can't take care of themselves and can't fend for themselves have been the victims of abuse and mistreatment And Stephen P. News cracking down on that, as well as the Zantac cancer cases. All of the, and hopefully I will not be joining this class. I'm a former proponent of Zantac. And folks, if you've watched as much bad wrestling over your lifetime as I have, you've taken a lot of Zantac. You may need to be calling Stephen P. New, whatever your case. If it's one of those or another where you feel that you need legal recourse, Stephen P. New can either take care of you, let you know who can, or tell you it's a lost cause. But he's honest. So he got that going for you. An honest attorney. Holy shit, what'll they think of next? 888-692-8084. Newlawoffice.com to get even with Stephen, the consigliere of the cult of Cornette. And a big bluegrass music fan, Brian, also. I'm sure he enjoyed my rendition of Dooley the other day.
I understand he was thinking about getting a class action suit for listeners who had an issue with their ears after you sang about possibly suing. Just what I heard. I don't know if there's any truth to that.
I don't think he would turn his talents on me, but he will turn them on the people that deserve it, folks. Stephen P. New, newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084.
Well, let's get a few more questions before we wrap things up. This next one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Amos in Vancouver, Canada.
Wait a minute. From Anus?
Amos.
Okay, it's just that New Jersey accent you got again.
Oh, we used to. First of all, it's a Long Island accent. Let's get things straight.
Yeah, well,
not
long.
With the retirement of The Undertaker, I was wondering about the name of the tombstone piledriver. The name obviously goes perfectly with the Undertaker gimmick, but I'm under the impression that it's had that name for longer than he had the gimmick. Do you know the origins of the name Tombstone Piledriver?
Well, it makes sense. Actually, that's why that they gave him that as a finish, because it makes sense. The Undertaker's finish would be the tombstone, but when you think about it, you're picking a guy up and dropping him, planting him like a tombstone. You can see the visual here. That as far as who was the first person to do it, Brian, I don't fucking know. Do you know? I mean, we were seeing it, and what did they call it in Mexico, where it was like the most deadly band hold of all time, but they had a name for it in Mexico back in the 70s.
Oh, I don't remember.
Was it
Excalibur would know.
Oh, God. Well, of course, yes. But anyway, it's been around. I don't recall knowing who did it.
Dynamite Kid used to do it a lot, and Gorilla Monsoon, even before The Undertaker, I remember Gorilla Monsoon always saying Tombstone Piledriver.
Well, but, when you go back and look at some of those old pictures of Andre was doing kind of a thing like that in the Montreal days when he was still younger and more agile.
Morocco did something like that, too.
Yeah. And, of course, it's somewhat similar to a shoulder breaker, like Roop used to do, but, just tucking the head and going to the knees. But it's been around for a while. And really, who knows who did the first thing first? Because probably it wasn't on tape or film, and most of the tapes and films, don't exist because Thez was so prolific and on top for so long in those Chicago film archives. You see Thez doing a power bomb. Of course, it wasn't a power bomb and it wasn't pretty. And with those rings, the way they used to be constructed, you didn't put a guy down with the same emphasis or they wouldn't have never got back up again. But it's the genesis of the move. Actually, somebody tweeted the clip the other day. We've told that story a million times about when Bubba Rogers hit Bill Mulkey with that move that he'd thought of and come up with and knocked Bill out. And that's when Dusty said, "Don't do shit you do not know how to do. Do not do shit you don't know how to do." But when they tweeted the clip, I remembered exactly what it was. We did a takeoff on the old finish that the Freebirds used to do. Michael Hayes and Terry Gordy did this, and later on when they got Roberts, they'd do a double backdrop, but Hayes would backdrop the guy into Gordy, who would grab him upside down and then drop to his knees and put the guy shoulder first down to the mat. And so what Bubba said, "Hey, if I can catch Bill and then I'm going to sit down." But nobody was using a power bomb back then, right? So this was kind of a sit down power bomb but he had caught Bill on the fly upside down and then just kind of sat down. And when his ass hit, one of those boards flapped up and he put Bill down fairly safe, but one of those boards lopped up on that TV ring because Bill said it hit him right in the back of the head. The board, bam, and it knocked him goofy. But Bubba was basically trying to invent the sit-down power bomb, which is in 1986. Nobody's doing that either, at least not that we fucking knew about. So that's kind of where that, but every once in a while, somebody will do something and do it so well that it catches on, or it's pushed and given a name, and then, you know, they know that move. So Undertaker with the tombstone, or Jake with the DDT, or whatever. And then, yes, the marks in their basement try to name it after a Japanese wrestler and you know, translate it into a foreign language so that it can sound even more complicated and goofy. But, you know, everybody's adapting shit that somebody else has done because there's only so many ways to throw somebody around. And when they ran out of ways to do it realistically, that's been the problem, is when the guys just started thinking about shit that they don't care whether it obviously requires cooperation or it doesn't really make sense because it's a cool move. When we thought of stuff in those days, it was, okay, how can we make it safe? How can we work and do it? But also, how do we do, if we can't do it where it doesn't obviously require cooperation from the opponent in an egregious way, visually obvious way, or it doesn't make sense that somebody would do that to begin with, then even if it's a good move, we don't do it. Now they put the cart before the horse. If it's a move, they don't care. It's like, you know, the fucking guy that when Muta started doing the handspring elbow. Well, you know what? He could kind of get away with it where it looked fucking badass because he would shoot the guy in the turnbuckle and he would run and do that quick cartwheel and come into the corner with momentum. And that elbow, boom, and it would look like it could do some damage. But then everybody else started doing it, and then the kids on the indie started doing it, and then the girls started doing it, and then it became doing a cartwheel and stop flat-footed and kind of lean into the guy in the corner. Well, that's the stupidest thing ever. Because if you can't pull the fucking thing off, don't do it. So that, anyway, in answer to your question originally, a lot of that shit was done, but it just wasn't named at that point or wasn't popular or hadn't caught on and been pushed somewhere with a guy that knew how to do it really well and the promotion wants to go with it. That's what gets moves over, just like it gets talent over. If the promotion is not telling the guy that's over to win his matches over and over with a specific move or to do damage over and over with a specific move, the move doesn't get over. It just becomes a goddamn miscellaneous move.
Well, one final thing on this. You've taken it. Is it a safe move?
The tombstone?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah, once again.
Safer than a regular pile driver?
Well, okay, let me all these things depend on who's doing it. Now, if Jerry Lawler gave me a regular pile driver, I wouldn't sure, no worries, King, give me another one. I'll take them all day. But if he was going to go give me a tombstone, I would, well, wait a minute, because have you ever done a tombstone? I've never seen it. So what's safer depends on who's doing it. I don't know that I've taken Jerry Lawler's pile driver and it's fucking gorgeous. I've taken Undertaker's tombstone. I don't know that I would want Undertaker to give me a regular pile driver because he haven't done them. And he's got bad hips. Maybe he might fucking not be able to go down flat and he'll fuck you up. Bobby Eaton, the guy that could do everything, could never give a pile driver because he could not somehow, he would always bend his right leg behind him when he was dropping and dropped the guy sideways with a pile driver because he could not, even though the guy that did the Alabama Jam off the top rope, flatter than a fucking pancake in the middle of the ring, when he had the guy up and he had his head between his legs, he couldn't get that move where he could go up and come down flat. Sometimes you just can't get things. So as to which is safer, it depends on who's doing it. But if you've got and I wouldn't let just some outlaw guy give me either one because he might not know what the fuck he's doing. But if the pile driver is one of the safest things in wrestling, if the guy knows what he's doing. And I would take that from any veteran before I would do any of these dives or catch any of these dives or do half of the shit that the guys are doing now. The first time I ever, was it first or second? First time I ever got pile driven was by Steve Kern on the concrete floor in the Mid-South Coliseum. It was a spike pile driver with Stan grabbing my feet because I just fucked him out of the World Tag Team title. That's the night Watts was there. So it was the second time I got pile driven because Lawler had done it first. But a spike pile driver with Stan coming off the apron of the ring, Kern dropping me on the concrete floor, Watts is there, and Jarrett's auditioning everybody. And I was a little trepidatious about that. And Kern just looked at me and said, once I fucking get your head between my legs, just put one hand here and one hand there on both outsides of my knees so you can fucking keep them together. And when I land, you'll feel the bump and push up. Okay. It looks like he fucking obliterated me on tape, and I never felt it. But these guys regularly take, and that's banned in the WWF now, right? The tombstones and the pile drivers, but they regularly do these dives and catch people coming off the top and take risks that, as we've seen, can put you in a hospital in the twinkling of an eye. So yeah, I'd pile drive me all day fucking long because I know how to take it as long as the guy knows how to give it.
Well, the things that got banned were really centered around things that had caused some neck injuries, not disagreeing with what you're saying, but like Owen Hart gave that tombstone. Well, I don't even know if you can call it a tombstone.
That wasn't a tombstone. And see, that's the thing. I had never seen Owen do that before. That's what always puzzled me. Never seen him do that move before. Maybe he'd done it in Calgary years ago, whatever the fuck. I don't know where it came from. And when I saw it, I was like, holy fuck. Everything's dangerous. If a guy wants to hurt you with a headlock, he can, or if he doesn't know what he's doing and you're trying to work with him, he can hurt you with a headlock. So everything's dangerous, but the stuff they banned, a lot of it made sense. The German suplexes high up on the fucking head and the neck, or the overhead throws, all the throws and shit where you're not in control of someone, that went too far. So yes, and the guys trying to get fancier than Dick Murdoch with the brain buster, shit like that. That, yeah, ban that stuff. But regular pile drivers with veterans that know what they're doing, that's ridiculous.
All right, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com. I should have checked this one first, from the Appalachian Assassin.
Okay.
Tommy Rich did not beat Harley Race.
What?
Anyone who thinks otherwise is an ass-eating Trump voting piece of shit. And that's all he wrote.
That's it.
You have any comments about?
So that's a statement rather than a question. Tommy Rich just did. Well, no, he didn't really beat him. Harley let him beat him. So maybe that's where he's going. But it's in the record books that Tommy did get that victory, but it was with Harley's okay. So if the Appalachian Assassin, I will agree that Trump voters also probably eat a lot of ass, but I can't agree that Harley never beat, or Tommy never beat Harley.
Well, on that one, our final question this week was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com. This is from Vincent Gambardella. My question has to do with Antonino Rocca. I would like to hear you talk about him as a historian. I couldn't find anywhere on the internet someone was talking about Rocca.
What?
Being Jim Cornette, can you tell me any famous stories about Rocca? How much he drew, how over he was? Someone who was so big in his time, and I feel is almost forgotten today. I would appreciate all you have to say about Rocca. P.S. I finally asked my 70-plus-year-old uncle if my grandfather ever took him to the wrestling matches. His response was, we saw Bruno, Rocca Perez, and Killer Kowalski at the old New Haven Arena in the 60s.
Oh, my God.
He didn't follow wrestling his whole life, so for him to say those names, I know he's telling the truth. I also see Tony Garea at the local Home Depot all the time. My father was his plumber for years, but we're getting off topic. Jim,
we're getting off topic here.
Antonino Rocca.
Well, if I hadn't hit the wrong button, I would have started even quicker. I'm gobsmacked that Rocca is not on the internet. You can't look up and read anything about Rocca.
Well,
on
no,
the
I mean,
internet?
you could certainly read some stuff. I don't know off the top of my head what goes into detail. I would think that probably Tim Hornbaker has something on his site. I guarantee there's a Wikipedia site, but I can't speak to the honesty of it because I haven't.
Well,
reviewed
anyway,
it, but...
and we should have made this question first. We won't go on and on ad infinitum, but you could on Antonino Rocca. But would you say definitely one of the 5 biggest stars of the 50s and in the Northeast was the guy probably for that entire decade? He and Miguel Perez are to this day the only tag team that have been the number 1 box office attraction in the wrestling business. And they did 2 straight years, 59 and 60, because they dominated the Garden. But Rocca was a special kind of guy. It was a gimmick even then. He was athletic. He was acrobatic, but still he was a full-grown man. He was close to 6 feet tall. He was 200 and some pounds. But nobody had seen the level of the cartwheels and the drop kicks and the acrobatics. And because he was from Argentina, so basically he could be the hometown boy for the Italians and for the Hispanics. And they brought him to Texas in 48-ish, and Cola Quariani, I think, didn't he find him and brought him to Texas? And they were using him on top in Houston, and then they heard about him. Yeah, they heard about him in New York, and they fucking stole him from Texas. And wrestling had been dark in New York from Madison Square Garden for 11 years, from 1938 to 1949, because of the exposés in the newspapers in the late 30s and the stuff with Dan Parker and the Fall Guys was written, and wrestling got on the outs in New York, and there was no wrestling in the Garden for 11 years. They try to bring it back with Thez on top. The NWA champion at the time didn't fucking draw. And I've made this point before, and this is a side topic, so we won't go into it in depth, but the efforts to revitalize wrestling in New York didn't work as long as they were appealing to the American audience, because the English-speaking American audience had seen all the exposés and heard all the dirty laundry and everything aired, and it killed it. But what did resurrect wrestling in New York was the ethnic hero with Rocca, because even back then, New York was so big, they had different language newspapers and different language, radio stations, and it was a whole different culture. So Rocca established the trend. When he came, when they started pushing him in the Garden, they started drawing 19,000 people. They sold out, and wrestling was huge for the rest of the decade in New York. And when they got tired of Rocca's formula, because he wasn't a great worker, he just did the acrobatics, and he'd kick you in the face with the barefoot, standing still, do the Billy Jack stuff, whatever, Billy Jack movie stuff, not Billy Jack Haynes stuff. When they got tired of that, they brought in Perez, the young Puerto Rican kid that the heels could get heat on, and then Rocca could get the tag, and they got 2 more years out of that, of nothing but money. Everybody was selling. The Fargos sold out with Rocca and Perez. The Grahams sold out with Rocca and Perez. The Kangaroos sold out with Rocca and Perez. So the ethnic hero was kind of entrenched, and they didn't get off of that until after Bruno's second run, which was 30 years later. Because to me, I believe that they built it that way because when they tried wrestling with just Thez and whoever they put against him to challenge for the belt that first time in the Garden, and if they tried the regular English language newspaper reading crowd didn't want to see wrestling at that point, but the ethnic heroes got them in and got them back. So anyway, Rocca was huge, and Rocca and Perez was huge. And because he dominated the Northeast, he was the top box office attraction because they had all the big markets and all the big buildings. But then, finally after the Rocca and Perez run, he was old as a single. The appeal was winding down. He was still a name, but they found Bruno. And you can go back and that excellent book that Scott Teal did on the history of wrestling in Madison Square Garden, you can see that as Bruno comes in, and after the initial time where they brought him in, he got on the outs with Vince Sr., went to Toronto. When Bruno comes back in, Rocca starts getting moved down the card. Bruno starts getting moved up. They briefly interacted on 2 shows, and then Bruno's in steady main events, and Rocca's out of the picture. And by the next year, Rocca's working opposition over in Jersey City and had gone to work for Jim Crockett Sr. When Crockett Sr., a lot of people don't even remember this happened, ran opposition to Vince because Vince Sr. had come down into Virginia, where Crockett ran, because their territories bordered. And Rocca ended up finishing his career pretty much on a major league level, working for Crockett in the Carolinas, doing all those small towns where he was getting by on his name, because at that point, he wasn't even that great physically anymore, and the Carolinas was used to premier workers rather than the gimmick guys. And he was, by 65, mainstream level, Rocca was pretty much done. Is that what do you think, Brian? Was that about the time frame?
Yeah, by the mid-60s, he was kind of done. The one thing I was thinking about as you were talking about it was, like so many wrestlers who got big during that time period, Jack Pfeffer created a knockoff, the Amazing Zuma, and then eventually they actually wrestled Zuma versus Rocca, and Zuma, no disrespect, but he was nothing to write home about.
They sold out the Garden 2 shows in a row, Argentina Rocca versus the Amazing Zuma. I saw Zuma wrestle on television in 1973 and 4. He was doing preliminary shows in the Tennessee territory. This guy was Argentina Zuma is the way they billed him then. He had to be 5'6", maybe, couldn't weigh 200 pounds, and did a pretty good cartwheel. But that was the thing, is that Rocca got so big, they created a knockoff of him. And then that was the time where Pfeffer got back in the New York office a bit.
He controlled the Garden. He didn't he get the Garden away from Vince McMahon Sr.?
Yeah, for about a year and a half at that point. Maybe not that long. But anyway, so the knockoff wrestled the real guy, and they sold the Garden out twice, turned him away. That's how hot Rocca was in New York. He was Bruno before Bruno was there. And they went ethnic heroes. From 1949, Rocca, Bruno takes over in 62, 63. The only one that replaces Bruno for a few years when he wanted out was Pedro Morales, who had the Puerto Rican and the Hispanic audience, and then back to Bruno until 1978, 30 years of ethnic heroes in New York City. I say it started, and then it just fed on itself, but it started because of the exposés of the 30s that killed wrestling for that decade for the English-speaking audience.
Yeah, Vern didn't do much in the Garden. Gorgeous George didn't do much in the Garden.
That's right. They brought Gorgeous George. He didn't draw in the Garden.
Yeah.
Vern Gagne didn't draw in the Garden. Lou Thez didn't draw in the Garden. And then Rocca immediately started selling it out.
All right, well, with that, Jim, the drive-thru has closed.
Wait a minute. Allow me to really express how we all feel. That's over with.
The Jim Cornette Experience debuts this Friday, wherever you find your favorite podcast. Next week, the drive-thru once again will be debuting on Tuesday. So experience.
And we will be watching some program and talking about it. Will we not?
On this show or on the Experience?
On the drive-thru next week.
Oh, we could be. I don't know.
Or are we doing that on the Experience?
I don't know what the hell's going on. What do we want? Oh, you mean the War Games that's coming
The big
up.
War Games.
It's so big I forgot all about it.
The big War Game. We're going to be doing something here. Experience this week on Friday. Drive-thru next week on Tuesday. Just tune in and we'll figure it out.
That's right. Of course, you can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com, available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Don't forget, you can get access to the archives, over 3 years of shows, patreon.com/Cornette, with new episodes or another batch of episodes going up each and every Sunday evening. Classic episodes of the drive-thru and the Experience. Patreon.com/Cornette. Also remember to subscribe to the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel for clips of episodes, full episodes, and Omnibus Collections, the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette. Cornette's Collectibles at jimcornette.com. The cutoff date is now December 7th to guarantee Christmas delivery.
I didn't say guarantee. I just said for best hope.
To guarantee
Best hope.
shipment at some point before Christmas.
Yes.
jimcornette.com. The drive-thru is brought to you by the law office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. But until Friday on The Experience and Tuesday right back here on the drive-thru, for Jim Cornette, I'm the great Brian Last. Tally-ho!
You know, for the first time in 9 years, I just looked at this mouse I've been using on the other side of it, and there's a lot of crusty, gunky-looking stuff on it. Should I be worried about that?